and my name's Ashraf Garda. I'll tell you what's getting my pulses racing is what happened last night when once again the UN vetoed, and I understand that we have different interpretations about the issue about Palestine as a nation. I understand that, but that's not what I'm talking about. What got my pulses racing once again, the blood boiling, is like it's left to you can have an entire General Assembly voting in one way. You can have the Security Council 90% voting in a certain way, and you get one member of the permanent members who vote a different way, and a resolution does not carry. And that's what happened with the USA yesterday. And in fact, that's what we're going to talk about. Not so much the detail of what happened, but the overall broader issue, which is, does the United Nations need reform? And how so? Perhaps a good question to ask you, even as we talk about it, maybe whether you're on the X platform and you're tweeting out, or whether you're listening right now, you're on SAFM, and then you can WhatsApp us right away. It's like this. Do you think that the UN should drop the concept of permanent members? Yes, if you think permanent members should be dropped. No, if you think that the status quo should remain. So what do you think? Permanent members should stay, or permanent members should drop? I'd love to know. And you can WhatsApp us right away. It's the easiest way, in a text form, like a vote line of sorts, isn't it? 0614 104 107. You can also comment via voice note and then call in, as always, 086 000 2032. I tell you what, being a Friday, as you know, we have this feature called the Fireside Chat, and today my guest is David van Wyk, and he's saying something that's really interesting, that bound to going to get you thinking about it. He's suggesting that far too many people leave their parents alone. Either they move to another city, to another home, or they move to another country, and these elderly have to fend for themselves. And he's asking the question, do we care enough for our elderly, or do we really leave them to fend for themselves? And perhaps, does that change from culture to culture? Are there cultural differences with regard to that? All of that will come up in our Fireside Chat with David van Wyk after 5 o'clock. So looking forward to that conversation. I can tell you, by the way, the issue of informal traders and Home Affairs wanting to ensure that these informal traders in townships, particularly, of course, right, need to be registered, okay, need to be sort of on site. I wonder where you sit on that particular issue. Anyway, that's all those things and so much more. But in a moment, we start with the United Nations. And does it need reform? And what form of reform needs to happen with the United Nations to stay relevant?
Freedom Month on SAFM. The month in which we had our first democratic election 30 years ago. This Freedom Month, as we reflect on the progress made thus far, we continue to commemorate the selfless sacrifices made for our democracy and freedom. SAFM, leading the conversation. You are listening to The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda.
Right. Does the United Nations need reform? And if so, what sort of reform are we talking about? Right. Let's find out more about it with Professor Scott Lucas, who's the Professor of U.S. Politics at the University of Birmingham. Prof. Lucas, appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us on The National Pulse.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you. So I've said, and you may have missed the intro, that when I watched the votes last night and the USA used its veto, yes, I mean, for the record, I'm certainly for Palestinian statehood, but that's not the conversation. The conversation that got me blood racing once again was that, again, this concept of the veto from the permanent members comes to the fore, and I just don't like that. So that's what I think. Many others have said similar things as well. Where do you fit in terms of the broader issue? Does the United Nations need reform?
Well, I think we have a serious issue with the way the Security Council is set up, with the veto power effectively giving 5 states, the say over all areas of international affairs. And of course, those 5 member states are the U.S., the UK, France, China, and Russia. And, that is a legacy of the system set up immediately after World War II, when, of course, some of those states had been the ones involved in the victorious fight over Germany and Japan. And the idea at that point was, well, that the League of Nations, which existed before World War II, had been paralyzed because it really didn't have a core group of powers to decide upon action. And so therefore the League of Nations sort of drifted as we went into World War II. What has happened has been that the UN has been paralyzed for another reason, and that is any one of those five powers can prevent effective action. In the case that you're immediately talking about, the U.S. has almost always provided political and diplomatic cover for Israel on issues regarding Palestine and now specifically Gaza in the context of the current war. But of course, Russia paralyzed the UN Security Council over Syria for years when the Assad regime was killing hundreds of thousands of people. China has paralyzed the Security Council when it comes to matters which come to Asian security. So, until you actually deal with some mechanism which means that everything does not end with the veto power, you're going to get on certain issues, not all issues, but certain issues, inaction.
Yeah, I suppose, let's just rewind. I mean, you mentioned, World War I and the turmoil of World War II and an absolute need for global reform. So the broader concept of the United Nations existing, I mean, would you be on side with that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the whole point is that the United Nations in a wider approach, if you talk about the General Assembly, means that, each nation state in the world has representation. It means that each nation state in theory can put issues forward that are of concerns to it. And then it means that issues that are of collective concern. Let's think about climate change, for example. Let's think about pandemics. Let's think about social justice, that the UN can address that. And in many respects, what we don't see behind the headlines is where this action is effective. The UN has many agencies, for example, that are carrying out vital work. You could talk about the World Health Organization. You could talk about the UN High Commission for Refugees. You could talk about the UN Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO. But when you get these, so therefore with the General Assembly and with those agencies, everyone has a voice. The issue is that when you have these big geopolitical issues of conflict, sometimes very deadly conflict, that it's not the General Assembly that has the powers to be able to carry out a collective mandate. It comes back to the Security Council, and it comes back to those five members. And so that idea of everyone being represented is effectively set aside for what effectively was what Franklin Roosevelt called the four, later five policemen.
And so how did they get into a position of being appointed or self-appointed permanent members of the Security Council and that's the one part, and the second part is having the right to veto?
Because they were the most influential countries at the end of World War II when the Security Council was set up. I mean, the United Nations had provided, of course, much of the effort that led to the defeat of the Axis powers. And Russia, of course, had done so as well, particularly in its successful defense and then attack on the Eastern Front versus the Germans. The UK had been involved in the war since the start and had held out against Germany and indeed Japan. France, although it capitulated during the war, the idea was when it was revived during 1945 is this was going to be the big continental European power, especially when you need to put limits on Germany. And then China was brought in, interestingly enough, because it was a U.S. demand, because you wanted an Asian power in there. It couldn't be Japan. At that point, nationalist China was very much a country that had ties with the United States. That situation flipped a few years later when the communists took power. But of course, communist China was not in the United Nations, was blocked from going into the UN until the 1970s, which meant that the small island of Taiwan for almost 25 years was one of the five veto powers on the Security Council.
Incredible, isn't it? But I mean, so I understand the point of influence, right? But isn't that the conundrum, that if the United Nations was formed on the premise of having a global body that has many arms, as you've mentioned, many organs, but certainly at the National Assembly, at the political level, to be able to have fair play globally, then the concept of those who have greater influence, has greater say above all else, is by its very nature an own goal, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's one I can't quite get my head around because, as I mentioned, we had the opposite problem before World War II, and that is when you had just a League of Nations, with everybody in theory being on the same playing field, the League was unable to take action again when one of the more powerful countries had an interest. So it was unable to act against Italy when Italy overran countries in Africa. It was unable to act or was reluctant to act when Germany gained strength in the 1930s. So it was only when you had disputes between minor countries that it would step in. I think the problem with the five powers on the Security Council, what it did during the Cold War, is it did maintain, in a sense, a balance of power, which meant that the United States could never leverage the Security Council to sort of be always an anti-Soviet body, and the Soviet Union couldn't leverage the Security Council to always be an anti-American body. But of course, we should be looking at more than balance of power politics. We should be looking at how to get action on concern to all countries, not just the major powers. And I just have to say to you that until we get a recognition that a wider group of countries need to be involved in making the decisions, and that those countries need to have the interest of their regions at heart, we're going to run into this. So, for example, if you were to let India in as a permanent member of the Security Council, which has been proposed, well, that might be fine until you talk about an issue which comes up, say, regarding Pakistan.
Yeah.
Then at that point, you can't see India taking any action, which is not going to have its priority, its long-running battle with Pakistan.
But isn't that the problem? That without getting into the morality of it all, every one of these permanent members have allies that they side with on fundamental issues, or that they oppose on fundamental issues. And the way it's currently loaded is once you're in Birmingham, so I'm thinking about the merits of Aston Villa Football Club, all right, meaning that you would rule VAR in your favor because you need to qualify for the next round or win the game, for example. And that is how it's playing out.
It is. I mean, in theory, what you would do with the Security Council, or arguably with the General Assembly, is that you would, if a power was directly involved in a conflict of interest, as it were, then it would not be allowed to cast a vote in the Security Council. So, for example, Russia would not have been allowed, because it was militarily involved in the Syrian conflict, to have actually cast a vote and thus vetoed UN action to help the civilians of Syria. One could make the argument that the United States is directly involved to an extent through its funding of Israel in what is happening in Gaza, so the United States should not be allowed to cast the veto over resolutions which concern Israel and Gaza.
And yet that's not the case, right? Yeah.
But that's not going to happen, because what the Russians would do is they would say, oh, Syria is all the fault of the Western powers. They're all ganging up on us and on Assad. So if we were not allowed to vote, then this would be politicized effort against us. If the U.S. wasn't allowed to vote over Israel and Palestine, they would say, oh, other countries such as Russia, such as countries in Asia and Africa, they're all out to get Israel. And so it's an effort against us.
And I suppose even a country like South Africa, having taken now Israel to the ICJ, then if it came to that sort of vote, they'd also be removed, because there would be a sense that they've already chosen sides. I mean, that's what you're saying, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, if South Africa, in other words, was a permanent member of the Security Council, then the Israelis would make the argument it could not be unbiased. But I think you raise an interesting point there. And I think it takes the discussion further in ways that we should look at. And that is, we should, I argue, should be looking more to the International Court of Justice, to the International Criminal Court, as part of the legal framework to address this question. So, for example, the ICJ, and we'll see where this ultimately comes out on the case before it regarding the Israeli alleged crimes in Gaza, will issue a ruling. Now, can you give the ICJ enforcement powers with that ruling, where Israel would actually be punished and not just be found guilty in principle? If the ICJ and the ICC were empowered, that would get around to an extent some of the problems that we have with the Security Council, but it would still not get around the political issues. So let's say that a power in the Security Council held out against taking meaningful efforts on climate change. There's no legal court at this point that could cover for that. So, using the judicial framework, including that of the UN, to address this would be a partial solution, but not the sole solution.
Two things before I let you go. The one is the sense that besides the influence, post World War II, and the influence these countries have, is the other that these countries that you've mentioned, the permanent members, are the major funders of the United Nations, in particular the USA. So if you don't like their veto, well, go and fund the UN. Without the USA, it may not exist.
Well, and that becomes a specific problem, for example, when we see it, for example, with the current issue around the UN Relief and Works Agency, which even before the current issue regarding Israel's military operations in Gaza, various U.S. administrations had cut back on aid to Palestine through it. It happened with UNESCO, where the U.S. withdrew funding from UNESCO for a time being. And I think at that point, what you have to say is that, again, if a country goes walkabout on those agencies and doesn't provide funds for it, then that country has no say whatsoever on what those agencies do. And yet, that's got to be the way that is.
And here's the last thing. In spite of all the things we've spoken about, do you have a sense there's an appetite for actual change? Will it happen? Will the countries of the permanent members, will their veto be vetoed?
There is an appetite for change amongst activists in many countries, amongst diplomats in many countries, amongst, people from civil society in many countries. But I have to say at this point that we run up with, the biggest dog in the kennel continues to stand in the way of it. And as long as these 5 permanent members put national interest above international interest, then you and I will be having the same discussion, I'm afraid, for time to come, which means we have to look at other organizations working in conjunction with the UN. South Africa, for example, working with regional organizations, working with NGOs to proceed forward on key questions, whether it be in the Middle East, whether it be in Asia, or whether it be in Africa, for example.
Or maybe the growing power of the BRICS nations, which is another whole question completely. Let's leave it at that. Thanks for your time, Professor Scott Lucas. Fascinating in terms of the role of the United Nations. He's the Professor of U.S. Politics at the University of Birmingham. And yet the question to you is this, should the veto for the Security Council members, should that veto concept be scrapped? Yes, if you think it should be scrapped. No, if you think it should not. And please vote on it right away. You can do it the best way is via text on WhatsApp 0614 104 107. And you can also tweet it out. Just tag us at SFM Radio on the X platform and tag me, Ashraf Garda, and use that hashtag, the National Pulse. Yes, no, and tell me why.
Nna lebitso la ka ke Bonolo Moahlodi Bantswang ba re ke Miss B Morara Miss T Moahlodi the Bonnie B Bonbon, and we'll be now playing Kena on Mondays at 4:30. The day has changed but the time slot hasn't. So if you're interested in news that's happening with us kids and our peers around the world, don't forget to tune in. See you there.
5-time champions plan to capitalize on home ground advantage, while 11-time champs have a huge strategy to dominate the battle from the first whistle. This is the first leg of the Total Energies CAF Champions League semi-final. Experience the exhilaration of African football. TP Mazembe FC versus Al Ahly FC, live on SABC1 this Saturday, 20 April at 2:30 p.m. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Ashraf Garda on SAFM.
Tell you what, in the conversation, India came up as to whether they should be a permanent member of the UN Security Council. Well, news about India, they have an election. Let's find out more about what's going on there. India, a 6-week election that takes place, 970 million voters, 10% of the world's population. Let's find out more about that and the aspects we should be looking at with Salman Khan, who's an independent geopolitical analyst for the Southeast Asia region. Salman, appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us on the National Pulse.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Right. So, well, it's obvious the election is significant by virtue of the numbers I've just given you, right? But let's. How is what happens in India impactful to the rest of the world?
Well, I mean, it is one of the biggest democracy in the world. It is fascinating to see that, 969 million people will be going to vote with the 12 million voting officials. Those will be administrating over the 6 weeks. I mean, this is just amazing. Textbook example for the developing country, and it's a lot to learn from that election to the rest of the world. Now, having said that, how does it affect the outcomes? I mean, of course, we living in a now not bipolar or unipolar world. It's a very multipolar world, and India is emerging as some sort of within their own right, a superpower within the region, joining the many formation like BRICS and Mercosur and IPSA, and including the Quad, which is the Australia, Japan, America, and India. So, of course, as a geopolitics, you will see the India election will play a significant role, and also, what would happen afterward, because of course so far the India has been very pro-Israel, and so that definitely still need to be seen in 6 weeks' time how their policies will dictate. And of course for the regional, it is definitely a huge factor for the growing might of the Indian economy, how it will confront or how it will counter the Chinese economy, and that is America has been also very vocal, and also hugely investing. Many Western countries are hugely investing into, not only just for the love of India or Mahatma Gandhi, it's just to counterbalance the might of a Chinese, to make sure that they counterbalance the might into Southeast Asia.
Well, with the general election, often a country's foreign policy plays some role. In South Africa, maybe the same with our election. The reality is it's still ultimately a domestic election. So what are the big issues, and who are the big players contesting India's election?
Well, I mean, this is, again, fascinating. And look, I mean, we have just over 200 political parties. I mean, here we're looking at 2,600 political parties going into the election. And, of course, the BJP is the favorite, and they have been dominating, and they're representing the Indian Hindu nationalism, around 80% of the population. And of course, as I said to you, there is not 200 parties, there's a 2,600 parties. So they are major players. India has always been governed, I would say, for the first 4 or 5 decades by the Indian National Congress. And because of the dynastical baggage they have lost, and of course they didn't deliver onto the mandate. And then of course here we go, the 2014 BJP, which was basically a Hindu fascist the party which was RSS, the wing of the RSS, emerged into the BJP. And the Prime Minister Modi was a part of the RSS. Then he actually became the BJP member. And the BJP, basically the RSS, the ideology was very much of like a Mussolini, Black Brigade, communism type of thinking.
Okay.
So, I mean, it is going to be quite interesting to see how the political parties, not the whole political parties, how their foreign policy will be underpinned by this election.
Perhaps the most important question, and in 30 seconds to wrap up, right, is, the incumbent president, prime minister of India, right, would he stay in power, or is there a chance he could be toppled?
Well, I mean, one of the issue is that he's a single man. He don't have any what you call it, any sibling or anybody else to take over the power, not like, the Gandhi family. So he will still be in a power. He is still a favorite. He is a role model. We call the Indian people, they call him is like a parivar. I mean, that his whole country is supporting him. And you must not forget, he has rose from the ashes of Gujarat massacre, which has given the rise to the Indian religious fascism, the India Hindu nationalism, and that is on the rise, and that will continue to be in the power. And Modi is definitely going to be the messiah for the Hindus, and he will continue to.
And you say
power,
that may give him the support. Well, let's see. I mean, that's happened. We've got 6 weeks to talk about that, and then the results, I think, may take even longer than 6 weeks. We'll find out about that. Thank you for your time, Salman Khan, who's an independent geopolitical analyst for Southeast Asia. So there you are. Elections in India have begun. 6 weeks of elections. Let's get the news headlines now. Here's Ann Musa.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Ashraf. In the headlines, the Special Investigating Unit has been granted authority to investigate allegations of serious maladministration in the Department of Water and Sanitation following a proclamation by President Cyril Ramaphosa. City Power Group Executive Tami Matiso has described the recommissioning of the first open gas turbine in Gauteng by Johannesburg's power utility as a big step to getting away from load shedding in the city. And Kenya's government has sent a team to investigate the helicopter crash that killed the military chief and 9 others. It was not immediately clear what caused the crash. I'll have details on these and other stories at 4.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good afternoon. Starting off in Gauteng, the M1 northbound in Belrose has a crash at Colette Drive causing delays. The N3 northbound has a crash before Buccleuch interchange. The M1 northbound in Woodmead has a crash before Woodmead Drive in Bedfordview. The R24 westbound has delays towards Alum Road. The N3 is where an earlier crash is reported. That's on the link to the N12 east at Gululis interchange. That's been cleared, but traffic is still slow moving. In KZN, the N2 southbound has a crash before Spaghetti Junction. The R620 Marine Drive has roadworks reported with traffic restrictions in the Ovongo area. In Cape Town, the N1 outbound slow moving towards Okavango Road. The N2 eastbound is queuing towards Broadlands Road. The M3 southbound slow moving towards Rhodes Drive, and the M5 northbound slow moving towards Kuburg interchange. With your traffic update, I'm Irma G.
This is SAFM Sports with Tuming Kapele.
Right, big stories. Friday.
Big story, a very big story. An update on the story that I ran just last week. Remember that story about those top 3 runners that allowed Tregier to win that race? When it's been
of course
confirmed.
I do.
Yeah, it's been confirmed that they have been stripped of their medals after this investigation into that questionable win. Now, he crossed the line first in a bizarre finish after the Kenya's Robert Keta and Willie Nagat and Dejeni Hailu from Ethiopia seemed to deliberately allow him to win. Mnagat told the BBC that the African trio were pacemakers, although the bibs did not say that. Now, the race investigations say that Mnagat, Keta and Hailu had not been properly registered as paymakers for Mkhea, so their actions on the finish line breached competition rules.
So wait. I know pacemakers, and it's not something we spoke about, because especially in shorter races, you have pacemakers try and break records, right?
Yes.
But they've had the medals taken away, and the winner?
Nothing has been said about the winner as yet. I guess whoever came back or came first after them is going to be the winner. But yeah, it's quite unnecessary for them anyway. Still staying with athletics, Nadim Wilschut clinched his maiden 10,000 meter title at the Athletics South Africa Senior Track and Field Championships in Pietermaritzburg, crossing the finish line in an impressive 29 minutes 19 seconds, representing Boland. Now he has his eyes set on the 5,000 meter race, and currently his main focus does not lie in qualifying for the Olympics, unlike his younger brother, who has already secured the spot in the 10,000 meter event for the upcoming Paris Games.
Just have one more scheduled 5,000 meters, which will be at the International Continental Tour in Bellville in the Western Cape, and then after that I'll see what I can do. But I think maybe I'll go back and with cross-country training for next season.
Then in football, Kaizer Chiefs forward Ashley Dupree says that nothing less than 3 points will do against struggling Richards Bay on Sunday. Amakosi are enduring a tough DStv Premiership campaign and head into this weekend's league clash in 8th place. They have not won a game in their last 4 encounters since defeating Golden Arrows in March, losing 3 and drawing once while falling to score in their last 3 outings. The Natal Rich Boys are 13 points worse off in 15th place with just 4 wins all season. Elsewhere, Germany manager Julian Nagelsmann has extended his contract until the conclusion of the next World Cup in 2026. He replaced Hansi Flick as German coach last September and had initially signed a contract to the end of the Euro 2024, which Germany will host in June. The 36-year-old has enjoyed a mixed start to his reign, but recently won back-to-back friendlies against France and the Netherlands, and will have 2 further warm-up games with Ukraine and Greece in June before the Euros, where they will face Scotland, Hungary and Switzerland in the group stage. In cricket, India captain Rohit Sharma has thrown his support behind any resumption of Test cricket against arch-rivals Pakistan, saying that it would be awesome. The South Asian neighbours are bitter political adversaries and have fought 3 wars against each other since they were partitioned at the end of British colonial rule in 1947. Now, the cricket teams have not faced off in a test since 2007. Instead, they play only occasional in the shorter versions of the game and usually on neutral territory in international tournaments.
And here's the strange thing about that. There's only like about 10 test nations in the world, right? Maybe even less, I don't know, 9. But at one stage, India, Pakistan and Bangladesh were one country, so they were just India. We would have even had less chance for players to play for that in that 11-man team. There
True.
you go.
Absolutely. Ending things off with motorsport, Lando Norris beat Lewis Hamilton to take pole position for the sprint race at the Chinese Grand Prix in a hectic wet season. The McLaren driver had his fastest lap time deleted and then reinstated in the final minutes of the session as he beat Hamilton by 1.261 seconds. Hamilton's Mercedes handed Fernando Alonso's Aston Martin by 0.714 seconds as Max Verstappen finished only 4th. The Red Bull driver made errors on 2 laps before sneaking in at the end. With that said, it's a wrap from my side for now. I'll have more in at the next
Wait, just
hour.
before you go. So yesterday, Zai Khan was here, right?
Yeah.
And Zai, where's Tumi? He's like, I think she's not well. Like, oh Shane, I'm so sorry. That's the line.
Yeah.
And that's the line that I thought. Like, you may not even come today, right? Mm-hmm. Then I go onto your Instagram accounts, and then I find that, in fact, far from being unwell, you are well because you're working very well, and you were involved in some really important event that you were program directing, moderating.
I was an MC of an event. It was a Women in Sports Symposium, and it was absolutely amazing. We had a lot of young ladies that want to get into the industry as a whole, and we had different panels from sports administration, sports management, sports journalism, and everyone was just talking about their journey and how you can get in there, and then also just discussing some of the challenges that we're facing as women in the industry in terms of gap pay, and also just being taken seriously in this industry.
Well, can I suggest either we spend the next 10 minutes talking about it, or that next week give us some sound bites of this important collision, and it's a collision in a positive sense between women in sport and the business of sport.
Yeah, it was absolutely amazing. I'll definitely do that.
Okay, fascinating.
I'll have more sports in the next hour.
Join us on Afternoon Express, Tuesday at 6 p.m. on S3 as we ask what makes a good friend with therapist Kim Abrahams. Social worker Tobeka Mbogazi shares how to move on from toxic friendships. And gents, get your buddies and make a delicious bacon and wors pasta. That's Afternoon Express, Tuesday at 6 p.m. Repeat Sundays at 8:30 a.m. only on S3.
Match day number 30 will deliver high emotions and tension. 14th and 15th placed VfL Wolfsburg and VfL Bochum must go beyond their limits in the final stretch. Who will climb the ladder to victory? This is the Bundesliga. Football as it's meant to be. Catch VfL Wolfsburg versus VfL Bochum this Saturday, 20 April at 3 p.m. live on SABC3. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. # We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
You are listening to the National Pulse with Ashraf Garda.
We'll have an update on the issues from the Health Ministry pretty shortly. I'm looking at our WhatsApps, and there's an interesting one. There's a picture of a person who's got no name, and in fact, you've got a name. Luatle Molloy, there we are. And it says, Ashraf, your voice is all over this cash in transit van. carrying millions. We love the show. I get a sense that this cash in transit van is tuned into SAFM. Well, you should do a video recording of it, man. Honestly, I mean, so we can pick up the sound as well, okay? Of me saying, Lewatli, thank you so much. Okay, and yeah, being a Friday, so great picture really. But send a video as well with the voice being all over this cash in transit van. I thought you spoke about a robbery when I saw that for a second or two. But keep them coming. Being a Friday, tell us where you are listening in the country, and if you can send a picture or a video with not just listening, but with actually the sound coming through of the National Pulse. Well, that'll be just fantastic. Okay, it'll be wonderful if you do that. Let's get to some of the callers on the big issues we've asked. I've asked this question about the UN Security Council veto. Should that be scrapped? Yes, if you agree. No, if you don't. And a simple vote line, you can WhatsApp me in text form 0614 104 107, or you can tweet. I put out a vote on. We put out the vote, in fact, on my timeline, and we'll link it to SFM Radio on the X Twitter platform. So, yes, no, tell me what you think about that, right? Let's get thoughts on that, however, with Lemias Mashile from Bushbuckridge. Hi, Lemias.
Hi, Ashraf. How are you?
I'm very good indeed. Good to connect with you on air once again. Yeah.
Yes, it's now going to be normal.
Normal? Okay, yes.
It's going to be normal. Ashraf, as much as we want the Security Council to transform the United Nations membership as well and policies to transform, one thing that the veto, I think it needs to stay there. It should not be removed because it forces consensus among the countries. Otherwise, if the veto is removed, then we're going to have a lot of ganging up, as we have seen now, with the ganging up against the membership, the full membership of Palestine.
But I mean, but wouldn't it still go to? But wouldn't it still go to a vote? What I'm saying, at the moment, the UN Security Council veto is in fact already a ganging up. It says it doesn't matter what the majority, the General Assembly says, that 5 countries and one of the 5 actually can decide whether a vote can pass or not. So that is a form of ganging up anyway.
That's correct, but what one is saying is that if you look at the other side for actually forcing consensus, whatever few countries that will actually gang up against any other country, then they know that that country they are ganging against, which has the veto, also will do the same when they have got interest in a particular matter. So I think you can imagine that currently the Western countries, we all know that they are totally against Russia or China, and whatever is going to come from those countries, they are going to veto it. But if you remove the veto, the Western countries will always gang against those and just pass everything at any time they feel like.
Okay, well
therefore, the veto must stand.
Right, so Lamia says the veto must stand. Okay, for the record, I disagree, and you know that. Thanks for that call, Lamias. But what about you listening, wherever you may be? You know, you could be in Cape Town right now, near the waterfront. You could actually be somewhere in the Polokwane region. You could be somewhere in Johannesburg or eThekwini, wherever you are. What do you make of this UN Security Council veto? Would you scrap the veto power of these UN Security Council permanent members or not? And the point that Lamias makes, that in scrapping the veto, you then leave it open to countries being bullied. I thought they're already being bullied, but you tell me. David in Pietermaritzburg. Hi, David.
Hi, Ashraf. Thank you for taking my call.
Great to connect with you on the National Pulse. Yeah, go ahead. What do you want to talk about?
No, man, I'm just concerned about the fact that no statement has been issued by those in authorities, more especially law enforcement, adding the attack of police by drug dealers, Nigerian drug dealers in Northern Cape. And for me, this is a very, very serious matter. They only tell us that this is a sovereign state. One is doubting that, given the fact that we are having another nation now in our country called Amapara, who take the drug substance as a result of these Nigerians who are roaming around the street in every city selling drugs openly.
So when you say no statement has been made, what are you saying? Have they been
I haven't
arrested?
heard any statement what is going to happen, because this is a serious matter. Attacking police in the police station, it's a very serious matter.
Okay.
For me, those Nigerians, because you hear that some just left, they damaged the vehicles and they left. For me, they should be in hospital.
Okay.
You know.
There we are.
They should be in hospital to show them that this is not a banana republic, but it's not the first time it's happening. Maybe it's the third time.
Okay, got that.
These drug dealers are taking
All
our
right,
police.
not a banana republic, and the point has been made there. Let's get one voice note. There's many. We need to play one now.
Good afternoon, Ashraf. Yeah, this veto is a dictatorship tool that U.S. is using, because the U.S. is always preaching us that they are the most democratic country. But why? How can it justify an action of opposing 39 member states for Palestine to be considered or to be granted a recognition of being a country, a state? And America said that no, we are opposing that. So these veto powers, Ashraf, they were just meant to destabilize the world peace, you know. So there's no need or no use of this veto power.
Well, I think there's a use of it. It gives certain countries the power. The question is that power a healthy power? And would they want to be willingly stripped of that power? And who will strip them of that power? Lots of questions here as we talk about issues as part of the Global Watch. The United Nations, is it in need of reform? What about South Africa's health issues? We have big issues there right after this.
DA leader John Steenhuisen. What qualifies the DA to run the country?
Firstly, we do not tolerate corruption. And where the DA governs, life is better. And that is why millions of South Africans are moving to DA governments. We still have much more to do. But in the past year, the Western Cape created over 300,000 new jobs and is working every day to become load-shedding free. We can bring this DA difference to the rest of South Africa, but only if you vote for the DA.
This political party advertisement was paid for by the political party concerned. The views expressed in this advertisement are those of the political party and not those of the SABC.
The Royal Club says victory on home soil is non-negotiable, but Ghanaian outfit Dreams FC can smell maximum points as a dream come true. The capital of Egypt faces the capital of Ghana. This is the first leg of the Total Energies CAF Confederation Cup semi-final. Catch Zamalek Sporting Club up against Dreams FC live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 this Sunday, 21 April at 6 p.m. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. # We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
You are listening to the National Pulse with Ashraf Garda.
Right, let's talk about issues in our country regarding, the Department of Health and the implications that it has in terms of healthcare to you and I, right? You may be aware, or you should, that we spoke about this a few days ago, about doctors in KZN, and in particular, I think 500 qualified doctors on strike because they can't get a job. So protesting, in fact, would be the right word. So let's find out about that. And I understand there was a briefing today on other issues around the state of South Africa's public health service, right? Foster Mohali with me, spokesperson for the Department of Health. Foster, good chatting to you, and thanks for joining us here on the National Pulse.
Good afternoon to you, Ashraf, and good afternoon to your listeners, and thanks for this opportunity.
Well, I'll tell you what, the word pulse is just so appropriate considering we're talking about the state of healthcare, isn't it?
Relevant.
What came out of today's briefing?
Yes, today the Minister of Health, Dr. Joe Butler, as part of regular updates on the status of health in the country, he did making announcements in terms of the progress with regards to efforts by the government or the department in order to recruit more health professionals, including the medical doctors. Underline the word, I'm saying health professionals, including the medical doctors, even though we've been hearing a lot of noise about unemployed doctors, but as the department, we're not only focusing on medical doctors because they don't work alone, they need the nurses, they need support staff.
Okay, but was there a general pronouncement in terms of general healthcare in the country, without the specifics, like in broad strokes, healthcare? How healthy is healthcare?
Yeah, you also touched on the issue of violent protests in one of the hospitals in the country, which is a Tema hospital in Mpumalanga, where the hospital had to shut down for almost a week because of some protesters from business sector in the area who demanded a business from the Department of Health, especially from the hospital, but also touched on the issue of update with regards to cholera cases in the country. You remember that the country has experienced the outbreak of cholera last year, but this year we've been experiencing the cholera cases, others both from imported cases from the neighboring countries like Zimbabwe, but other cases were detected without travel history. So we also had to provide an update as far as the number of cases that were currently detected in the country, but also that to encourage South Africans to say we are not off the hook as much as long as our neighboring countries, they continue to battle the outbreak of cholera because of cross-border movements. We are not out of the hook, but we need to be careful, try to be cautious at all times, and try to observe preventative methods.
Let's zoom in on the issue of those striking or protesting, rather, which is the right because they were unemployed, protesting medical doctors in KZN, 500 of them. What's happened there?
Yeah, as I indicated that so far we've managed to recruit about 2,066 healthcare professionals, of which 1,121 are medical doctors alone. So, and as we speak, the provinces, including the province of KwaZulu-Natal, is busy finalizing the next batch of recruitment of doctors, which are supposed to assume the duties come the 1st of May. So this not only in KZN, but also in other parts of the country. But we are doing well in terms of, you remember that a few months ago we announced that we managed to confirm the appointment of 270 doctors, but now we are over 1,000. So mean that we are doing well in terms of...
so how has this changed from a position where like a week ago, 500, not talking of 5, we're talking of 500 doctors can't get jobs, and a week later they suddenly can get jobs?
No. As I said, by between now and the 1st of May, surely that number would have been reduced, if not all of them. Absorbed.
But I mean, the first of May is immediate. I mean, what I'm saying, what has changed? Has the budgets changed? What has changed in terms of affordability? Because what we do know is there is a shortage of doctors. There's a need for doctors. It's not like there's a overflow where there's no need for doctors at hospitals, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not only the shortage of doctors, but shortage of nurses, shortage of dentists, psychologists, physiotherapists. Hence, I indicated from at the beginning that when we recruit, but we also recruit them as a team. There's no way that you can recruit only the doctors. The doctors, they need the support of professional nurses. They need of other admin support. They need radiographers, the dentists, the pharmacists, and so forth. So that's why when we do our recruitment, we look at this in totality, not only one category of health professionals.
Okay. Just the last thing in 30 seconds. I understand that there's been some doctors who are currently in state employ where their budget's cut in terms of their salary to be able to afford, for the Department of Health to be able to afford to pay for others. True?
You're saying that doctors who have been appointed but we are unable to pay them. Is it what you're saying?
No, they've had their salaries cut in terms of percentages to be able to afford to pay other doctors.
It's not salary cut per se. Remember, the doctors on top of their salaries, they also qualify for what we call commuted overtime, just like yourself now in your show. If you need to make extra cash, you can request the program manager, say, please, can you feature me in the midnight show so that I can try to make extra cash.
I'm going to remember that midnight story. Okay, that's where we can leave it. Foster Mohali, spokesperson for the Department of Health. Me, Ashraf, doing the midnight show, spinning discs. I can just imagine that. Let's get an update on the Senzo Meyiwa trial after this.
Ashraf Garda on SAFM.
Right, an update on the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial. The state has called a new witness to testify about the DNA swabs obtained from some of the accused in the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial. That's in the Pretoria High Court, you know. Let's get more detail about that with the SABC News reporter Pearl Magubani. Pearl, hi.
Good afternoon, Ashraf, and to the listeners.
Thank you. So what are the big things that emerged today?
Well, today we had two witnesses that were called to the stand, one being Sergeant Zie, who was the one that went to Johannesburg prison where accused number 3 was, and another prison where accused number 4 was, just to get swabs from their cheeks. And all he said is that this was under, the order of Brigadier Geninda and Sergeant Mukhola, who are part of the investigating team, and he just came just to testify about his role in that. And then Sergeant Mukhola was called then just to testify about the chain of events of evidence as to saying that she was the one responsible, or she was present when these swabs were being taken, and she kept the exhibits safe and stored them in her office until they went to the forensic lab where they were tested. However, the results of those swabs have not been, disclosed of in court yet. However, during cross-examination, the defense did ask her about the arrest of accused number 1, who was arrested on the 30th of May 2020 on a different charge, and he had been in prison throughout. The defense saying that, initially when Muzusibia was arrested, there was not the police then knew that they wanted him for the Senzo Meyiwa case, and they mentioned it to him. However, had to arrest him on different other charges, that being a drug-related charge and possession of ammunition, just to get him for the Meyiwa trial.
Okay.
Wow. Yes.
Fascinating. Anything else come out?
Yeah, basically the defense says that, they're convinced that all those charges did not hold the drug and the ammunition charge, and that's why he spent a few months in custody, interrogated. We do know that there are allegations that he was allegedly assaulted by the police. For him to sign the alleged confession, Muzi Sibia, as one of the made a statement, as well as accused number 2, with regards to other people's involvement in the murder case. But the defense is just saying that they wanted all these other charges that were not real to stick before they could question him about the Senzo Meyiwa trial, and that warrant of arrest was only issued a few months later when he was already in prison for the drug and ammunition charge.
Let's see how that one plays out. So we'll chat next week, I'm sure, right?
Yes, we will. We are back in court on Monday. Mokhola is still expected to be on the stand under cross-examination, not only from Ngome Zulu, but all the other defense counsel still need to poke holes at her testimony.
Okay, have a good rest, and then back to court on Monday. Pearl Magubani, the SABC News reporter who's covered extensively the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial. By the way, there's a couple of WhatsApps messages. Imagine, let me just see if I can get this one. Can you please ask the Department of Health about the employment of EHPS? Okay, well, can't really do that now. Another one, Rohan saying, Ashraf, I'm not sure if you've considered the implications of no veto power in the Security Council. Neither Russia nor China would agree. People love picking on the USA, though sometimes deservedly. But to my point, with your suggestion, please analyze what would have happened when Russia invaded the Ukraine. Then think of the probability of China invading Taiwan. Due to their vetoes, the subsequent result of a UN ballot would be catastrophic. Also, why would Chad's vote carry the same weight as America? Who would financially support the resulting organization you're proposing? It's not perfect, but what I mean is I consider the absurdity of Britain going to war with Germany while both quoting God is on their side. The same God, we live in a complicated world, just my thoughts, Rohan. In fact, I did make that point, that, they're the funders, but I'm not too sure how that can play out in terms of a vote. Is it a majority vote, or you need like 80% vote to overturn, to replace the concept that we have now of a veto? But suggestions are welcome. Let's get the news now. Here's Ann Musa.
In our top stories, SIU to probe water and sanitation's maladministration claims, and AKA's former bodyguard granted bail in Fort Hare matter. Good afternoon. The Special Investigating Unit has been granted authority to investigate allegations of serious maladministration in the Department of Water and Sanitation, following a proclamation by President Cyril Ramaphosa. The investigation aims to recover financial losses suffered by the state. It allows the SIU to look into unauthorized, irregular and wasteful expenditure incurred by the department. The unit will also establish whether there was any unlawful appropriation or expenditure of public money. SIU spokesperson Kaiser Khanyaho.
Causes of such maladministration arising from the procurement of or contracting of goods, works or services concerning the block project and the contract entered into in respect thereof between the department and Sidibeng Water, the almost empty outdoor campaign, and the appointment of Sidibeng Water as the implementing agent in an allegedly irregular manner for the provision of generic services in 2016. The War on Leaks program and the alleged irregular appointment of Rainwater and the Energy and Water Sector Education and Training Authority.
City Power Group Executive Tami Matiso has described the recommissioning of the first open gas turbine in Gauteng by the Johannesburg's power utility as a big step to getting away from load shedding in the city. On Wednesday, the City of Johannesburg's power utility City Power recommissioned the John Way substation open gas turbine, which it said will add 50 megawatts of power to the grid. The launch is part of the city's wider energy plan to add new sources of electricity to the grid. Matiso says the gas turbine can run for about 8 hours a day.
Yeah, so the Joburg peak demand is about 2,400 and our stage is about 5% of that. So what is actually happening is that this is the first amongst the other initiatives that we're going to have to make sure that we either push back power back into the grid for us to be able to mitigate load shedding in the city. We have, according to our feasibility studies, we can run them for about 8 hours in a day, so we can be able to mitigate most of the period during the day and business hours during a load shedding period.
The Alice Magistrates Court sitting in Dimbas on the Eastern Cape has granted bail of 200,000 rand to Anwar Khan, who's also the former bodyguard of slain rapper Keenan aka Forbes. Bail was refused to his co-applicant Terence Hubert. Khan's bail conditions are that he must surrender his passport, report to a police station daily and not interfere with witnesses in any way. The duo are part of the 21 accused facing charges of fraud and corruption at the University of Fort Hare. The NPA spokesperson Luxolo Tyali says they are satisfied that the court found in the state's favour with regards to Hubert.
Businessman Justin Peter King was added today as the 21st accused and was granted 50,000 rand bail that was not opposed by the state. He is expected to appear alongside the other co-accused on the 9th of May. In the meantime, the bail application of 2 of the 16 accused that were arrested earlier this month, Terence Joubert and Anwar Khan, has been postponed to Friday for judgment.
The investigating officer in the Senzo case, Batu Mukhola, has been recalled to take the stand at the High Court in Pretoria. Mukhola has been testifying about the chain of evidence after Sergeant Mondli Papitsie took DNA swabs of accused 3 and 4. 5 men are on trial for the murder of the Bafana Bafana captain who was shot and killed in 2014. Mukhola says she was present when the DNA swabs were taken and was responsible for the exhibit bag until they were sent to the forensic lab.
Sergeant Ziye was there to take DNA buccal swab
After he was done, my lord, with them, he gave them to me. Then my lord went to Ereton and locked the exhibit inside the safe, my lord. My lord, I then took the said exhibit, my lord, the DNA sample, took them from the safe and then forwarded them to a forensic science laboratory, my lord, under biology.
Further afield, and finally, a man has been arrested after threatening to blow himself up at Iran's consulate in Paris. French police earlier cordoned off the Iranian consulate. A police source told wire service Reuters the man was entering the consulate carrying what appeared to be a grenade and explosive vest. Recapping the top story, the Special Investigating Unit has been granted authority to investigate allegations of serious maladministration in the Department of Water and Sanitation following a proclamation by President Cyril Ramaphosa. For SAFM News, I am Anne Musa.
Coming up in your sports this hour, Sharks change entire starting team for Glasgow match, and Sambini targets his 8th senior national title. More details at 4:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good afternoon. Starting off in Gauteng, the M1 southbound in central Johannesburg is slow moving towards Crown Interchange. The N3 northbound is slow moving towards Buccleuch Interchange. The M1 northbound has a crash reported before Woodmead Drive, causing heavy delays. The R21 northbound in Kempton Park has a crash after Pomona Road exit. Marlborough Drive eastbound has delays towards Zinnia Drive, and Eskem-Patleli Drive northbound in Pretoria has delays towards Moot Street. In KZN, the M13 eastbound has roadworks with traffic restrictions. That's at the N3 Paradise Valley Interchange. The M4 has roadworks with traffic restrictions at Tongaat Beach, so you are to expect delays there. The N3 has roadworks with major upgrade works between Spaghetti Junction and the M13 Paradise Valley Interchange. The N2 southbound is queuing towards Spaghetti Junction, and the N3 in both ways has roadworks reported with traffic restrictions in that Cliffdale area. In Cape Town, the N7 Jakes Harville Drive southbound is slow moving at Voortrekker Road. The N2 Nelson Mandela Boulevard outbound is slow moving towards Hospital Bend. The M3 Philip Khosana Drive outbound is slow moving. That's towards Hospital Bend. The N1 outbound slow moving towards Okavonga Road exit, and the M5 southbound is slow moving towards Krombum Road exit. With your traffic update, I'm Irma G.
And we would buy 500 cars, and we would buy 500 more. So sell your car for the best price, and we won't think about it twice. We buy cars, we buy cars. Da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-da-da. We buy cars, we buy cars. Da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-da.
We Buy Cars, the easiest way to sell your car by far.
Match day number 30 will deliver high emotions and tension. 14th and 15th placed VfL Wolfsburg and VfL Bochum must go beyond their limits in the final stretch. Who will climb the ladder to victory? This is the Bundesliga. Football as it's meant to be. Catch VfL Wolfsburg versus VfL Bochum this Saturday, 20 April at 3 p.m. live on SABC3. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda on SAFM. You're listening to the National Pulse. Weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m.
So, according to the Department of Health, that all those doctors in KZN and nurses and other medics will get jobs now, like 1st of May, from a position of 500, without jobs a week ago. Something's changed there, if you know much more about it yourself, especially if you're a medical doctor or a nurse or somebody in the medical fraternity. Then what about you calling in and telling us what's been your experience of being qualified and not getting a job, and now being qualified and getting a job because you've been offered the job and things have changed for you? I want to know, and you can do it in one of many ways. You can call in 086 000 2032. Then you can WhatsApp, text, or voice note to 0614 104 107. You can also tweet out on the X platform. Just tag SAFM Radio. Do tag me, Ashraf Garda, and use that hashtag, the National Pulse. And staying on the issue of the United Nations. Lots of different feedback about that. So you tell me again. In fact, the Rohan's point is interesting because, and I hear what he's saying, right? But I think it needs to be workshopped, right? So would you do away with the veto power of the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council? Yes, if you would. No, if you won't. And best way to do that is just do a quick vote on our WhatsApp line in text form. I want to know. By the way, today on a Friday we have this fireside chat, and today chatting to David van Wyk. And David is a lead researcher at the Benchmarks Foundation. But here's the thought that he's talking about. He wants to talk about, do we care enough for the elderly? He's suggesting that too many people move and their parents sort of move apart. One lives in a different city, sometimes in the same city, sometimes they move into a different province, and often in a different country. And those the elderly are left to fend for themselves. So, you have a thought on that? Personal experiences? We can have a nice chat about a very important issue anyway, after 5 o'clock for about 45 minutes or so. So looking forward to that, right? Let's, however, and by the way, what's it, load shedding? What's it, day 23 now? Day 24? I'm losing count. I know I've pronounced on it already in terms of the why. We'll get another take on that with Chris Yelland coming up around 4:45. Do not miss that issue, right? And is it linked to the elections? Well, what about this year? The Home Affairs Minister, Aaron Motsoaledi, this week briefed the media on the final white paper on citizenship, immigration and refugee protection. But here's the thought here. He mentioned that all spaza shops need to be audited and registered to pay tax. Let's understand what that means from someone who I think may be directly involved in the implications thereof, with Rosheda Muller, who's the president of NITASA, which is the National Informal Traders Alliance of South Africa. Rosheda, I appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us on the National Pulse.
Good afternoon, and hi to all the listeners.
Much appreciated. Thank you. Right. What is your understanding on that issue? The focus on spaza shops needs to be effectively registered. They need to pay taxes. They need to be audited. They need to be compliant. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, when we look and go back to 2015, I think at the ILO, there was a recommendation 104, which our country, South Africa, is a signatory to, and it speaks about the formalization of the informal economy. Now, we've been working on the formality and the informalization of the economy since that time. And I think we, as an organized structure within the informal sector of South Africa, has been working closely with the ILO on this matter. And we found that not even local government has, attempted to assist in this process. But one needs to understand, what does formalization of the informal economy mean? It does not now mean that you're now going to be paying taxes, and it does not mean that you're now all of a sudden in a brick and mortar, structure. What it meant was that all informal traders should be afforded an enabling environment, an environment which is conducive to their trading. As you know, most of the informal sector out there are trading in open air. They have no infrastructure, very few have infrastructure, which is, I think, a very important priority for government to ensure, as we, the informal traders, are the ones that create our own jobs. With a high unemployment rate that we have in our country, we need to be protected by our government, and enabling environment should be, what we trade within. When the wind blows or it rains, we just cannot operate. When it's too hot, your product is going to burn away. So those are important matters in formality, which has not happened as yet.
Okay, I hear that. But let me just focus on the specific issue of being audited and registered to pay tax. So, is your organization, is NITASA, are you supportive that informal traders must pay taxes?
Well, I would say that, formality of the environment is critical for the future of the informal sector. And we support the stance around illegals operating within our area and auditing of tax and that. However, you are not an informal trader by choice. You informal trader because you eke out the survival. There is no formalized job for you. So you create that. And yes, you can gladly audit us because we're going to be below the tax bracket. So we do believe in legal and regulation. We do believe that. But there's so much more important priority matters that government needs to look at to create that environment for us to grow and flourish and then impose.
So do you suggest that, in fact, the Minister of Home Affairs who's raised this issue, in fact, is barking up the wrong tree, that there are other priorities, and can I just paraphrase, he's wasting his time worrying about this issue of the taxes?
Absolutely. Number one, the entire national government is aware of the existence of the informal sector being organized and that we are there. But we did not even have a direct roundtable on the discussions that affect us as the informal sector. They have engaged municipalities, they have engaged SALGA, but where are the people who are directly impacted upon? We have been left out again. We are always looked upon as second-hand citizens.
How do you shift from being left out to being, having a seat at the table? That means what level of representation has your organization made and other lobby groups made to ensure that you are not left out?
Well, I think, thank you, SAFM, for bringing us on this talk so that we can be heard. But we always communicate to, national departments, but, it is just like you're not acknowledged. So I think there needs to be a very strong lobby of the informal economy workers to pressurize national government that we participate at any level of policy making so that we can give them the correct stories. Yes, we have many challenges. We have many issues with illegal traders and that. But we, the sector itself, the organized structures that has done presentations to government, in other areas as well, that we are being heard before they pass policies like this.
Okay, I'm looking at this white paper from the Minister of Home Affairs on citizenship and immigration and refugee protection, and I found it very interesting that in the white paper, the issue of audited sponsorships and the need to pay taxes are mentioned. Why I'm saying that, I would have thought the issue of audited and a need to pay taxes would have come from SARS as opposed to the Minister of Home Affairs. Do you understand where I'm going for? What does that tell you? What message is he sending out?
Well, the message that's definitely standing out, that they're overlooking the priority issues of economic empowerment of those who are vulnerable and need enabling environments, and rather go shoot gun high to see that they are bringing about more money into the coffers, which we don't know where it's going to go.
Well, I'm going to suggest
let's
differently.
Get back to the drawing board.
But I'm going to suggest differently. I'm suggesting that, in fact, the fact that the white paper includes the issues of citizenship and refugee protection, they've linked the two, suggesting that when these foreign nationals come to visit, live in South Africa, it is they who needs to up their game and therefore be audited and be regulated. And that's why it's brought up by the Minister of Home Affairs as opposed to somebody else.
I see your point that you're raising, but to me, it is about our constituency. It's about us who are still very much suffering from the COVID era, that we have not, grown into a sustainable environment, sustainable business as yet.
Okay.
So there's much to be done, and it must be done with the sector, the national structures that is there, that exists, that is recognized at government level, but not. Yeah.
Go and have those meetings. Make sure it does happen, and it should be an election issue, I think, informal trading, and let us know what's happened around that. Rashida Mullah, appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
The president of NITASA, the National Informal Traders Alliance of South Africa. Now, let me just pick up on that point. What do you make of the fact that the Minister of Home Affairs talks about citizenship and immigration and refugee protection in his white paper and includes the issue of spaza shops and needing to be audited and registered to pay taxes, linking those who are refugees and immigrants and that link as opposed to the normal trader who may be South African and needs to be registered and audited? I'm just trying to understand it. If you have any thoughts on that, well, I want to know, because ultimately all of that links up to what we consider impacts on the national pulse, right? Okay, 0614 104 107, text or voice notes, otherwise to call in 086 000 2032.
Good afternoon, passengers. This is your captain speaking. I'd like to begin by welcoming everyone on board to Flight S3 2024 as we channel our sense of adventure and inbound for a trip around the breathtaking wonders of Africa. So get ready to open up and see our continent like never before. Africa's beauty is a sight to behold, from the peaks of Tanzania to the rainforests in Rwanda, from the pyramids in Egypt to the lakes in Malawi. There's magic in every destination that opens our eyes and changing our lives forever. Our trusted cabin crew, Doctors Fez and Anesu, will keep you entertained throughout the journey. On behalf of our crew members, we'd like to say thank you for flying with us and channeling a better you. Don't forget to catch the new season of Top Travel every Saturday at 8:30 p.m. on S3. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. S3, open up.
The Royal Club says victory on home soil is non-negotiable, but Ghanaian outfit Dreams FC can smell maximum points as a dream come true. The capital of Egypt faces the capital of Ghana. This is the first leg of the Total Energies CAF Confederation Cup semi-final. Catch Zamalek Sporting Club up against Dreams FC live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 this Sunday, 21 April at 6 p.m. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Ashraf Garda on SAFM.
There's a few yeses in terms of my question: should the UN Security Council veto for permanent members be scrapped? And there's another yes, why a small number of countries must decide for the whole world. Okay, let's get to Limpopo now. Billy wants to talk about spaza shops. Of course you should, Billy. Hi. Yeah, thanks for connecting to us, Billy. Go ahead.
Thanks. I want first to define what a spaza shop, because if you say people must pay taxes because of a spaza shop, then what do you do with the hawkers who are hawking, who are selling in the streets as well? Because I think Mr. Mzwaledi, or Dr. Mzwaledi for that matter, must understand what he wants to tell us. These spaza shops mainly are home sellers, people who are selling from their own houses. Okay? There are shops which are built, we've got business sites, which must be taxed because they are there for businesses. But people who are selling from their houses, who are selling from the streets, you cannot tax those kind of people, because otherwise you have a problem of establishing their location where they stay.
Okay, so I hear you. So you're suggesting that those that are hawkers and selling from their homes, I mean, they must not be taxed, they must not be audited, because, as I think the lady Rashida Mullah made the point to say, they absolutely battling to make ends meet. They can't get jobs, and this is their way to eke out the survival.
Who are supposed to be assisted. Instead, they say they want to tax them. For what? People are selling sweets, people are selling cigarettes and bread just for the convenience. And these people, some of them don't even have the transportation. They use taxis, they use the public transport. just to make ends meet.
I
So
agree
he
with
must
you.
focus.
Yeah.
He must focus on parastatals that have collapsed and make money.
Okay. And we'll have more money.
They'll be saying they are going to tax the same grants that they are giving to our people.
I must say, on pure humanitarian grounds, to be able to tax a single mother working from home, selling sweets, making 20 rand a day, and you're taxing them, even if it's 10%. First of all, they wouldn't be eligible to pay tax because the income would be too low. But why would you do that? Thanks for that call. Let's get more onto other issues that I think really should concern you, right? Now, research shows that the food giant Nestle, and you know them, is intentionally exposing young children from developing countries like South Africa to foods containing high levels of sugar. The key word here is intentional. Petronelle Kruger is with us, the program's manager for the Healthy Living Alliance. Petronelle, you have a story to tell us. What is it?
I do have a story to tell you, and I hope after this we're all incredibly angry. So this week we found out that food giant Nestle, who has an already very checkered past with especially exploiting children in Africa, have now been found out that in global north countries, they do not add sugar to their food products aimed specifically at babies, because on their own admission, it's bad for young babies and children. But in developing countries, and South Africa and Senegal and India's on that list, and Central American countries, they add up to 8 grams of sugar. And this has a wide range of impacts. Number one is they're clearly trying to get the population addicted to sugar. Why? Because they also produce... Yes.
But let me. You're saying they also produce what?
They produce... They are one of the world's largest producers of other ultra-processed food products. So it means they don't just produce baby foods. They produce products that teenagers and adults will then eat later in life. And they themselves have said that their food portfolio would be classified as 60% unhealthy. And that's because they add sugar to things. So now we're seeing there's sort of a cradle-to-grave intention here to make sure that they can co-opt consumers into developing a taste for their product.
All right. I'd like to get clarity on this. Are Nestle cutting back on sugar when marketing to developed countries, or are they adding extra to developing countries? I know it's a flip side of a coin, but there is a difference between the two there.
Well, no, that is actually a fantastic point that you're making. So they're adding the sugar when they send it to poorer countries. So if you're in Switzerland or Germany or in the United Kingdom, most of the prominent foods that are sold for babies or toddlers would contain 0 grams of added sugar. But when they ship their products to other countries, they then intentionally add sugar. And that is to create this pipeline of the consumer.
And the basis for your allegations are what? I mean, where's the research? Where's the report?
Fantastic. The report's online. You can go and look at it. Public Eye Switzerland have published the report. They have sent products from all over the world to a testing facility to test how much sugar is in the products. And they've noted that in Switzerland, it would say no added sugar, and there would not be the same claims in other countries. And Nestle, for example, in India, have now come out and said, well, we're still trying to reduce the amount of sugar that we're adding. So we have scientists who've tested this in a lab, but a lab in Belgium. So it's an independent laboratory, and they have gone and they have published this. So you feel free to go and Google. There's a lot of fantastic sites that will link you to this, but you can go and Google the IPFAN Nestle report.
I'll leave it to you to tweet out also those links. Just tag SAFM Radio, tag myself, use the hashtag the national pulse. Here's the last thing. I'll read out their statement after the news, the Nestle statement, but here's the last thing, Petronelle. So I gather your organization has approached Nestle. What have they told you? What do you want to come out of it? You've got 30 seconds to answer it.
we don't approach Nestle. There's absolutely nothing that you can do with Nestle. Nestle steals water from countries. They've been involved in child slavery allegations. There's nothing Nestle can say to defend themselves on this issue.
So you don't buy Nestle. I got that. Clearly. Thanks for your time. Petronelle Kruger. We'll read out the Nestle response as well just after the news, right? Petronelle Kruger is the program's manager for the Healthy Living Alliance. I tell you what, we need to get Nestle on board to actually speak about this. But if you know much more about from the Nestle point of view or anybody else, feel free to comment about it. Love to know. Let's get the news headlines now. Here's Ann Musa.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Ashraf. In the headlines, the Western Cape government is considering placing the Knysna municipality in the Garden Route region under administration. The provincial government has recently filed criminal charges against the municipality for allegedly failing to adequately respond and implement waste removal plans. The Special Investigating Unit has been granted authority to investigate allegations of serious maladministration in the Department of Water and Sanitation, following a proclamation by President Cyril Ramaphosa. And a 16-year-old girl who was standing at the gates of Belgravia High School in Flay Road in Athlone on the Cape Flats has been killed in a suspected gang-related shooting. Details on these and other stories at 5 with Greg House.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good afternoon. Starting off in Gauteng with some advance notice for the R21. It will be closed between Nelma Pierce Drive and Olifantsfontein Road from 6 a.m. until 6 p.m. on Saturday and 6 a.m. until 12 noon on Sunday for Eskom works. The N4 westbound in Bronkhorstspruit has protest action between Balmoral and Bosmanskraal, so you asked to expect delays there. The N1 northbound in Centurion, an earlier stationary vehicle near Old Johannesburg Road has been cleared, but traffic remains slow moving. And Mabopane Highway southbound in Pretoria has a crash reported at the Hairpin Bend. In KZN, the N2 southbound is queuing towards Spaghetti Junction. The M7 westbound is queuing at Bel Air Wakesley Road Junction. The R620 is closed. That's in the central Market area due to storm damage, and Bel Air Road has roadworks with traffic restrictions near Chief Albert Luthuli Hospital. In Cape Town, the N2 outbound in Somerset West has a crash reported before Hazelden Drive. Waltervreden Drive in Mitchells Plain is closed between Cedar Avenue and Spine Road. Turfel Road is slow moving through Hanover Park, and Turfel Road in Athlone is slow moving near the M7 highway. With your traffic update, I'm Irma G.
This is SAFM Sports with Tuming Kapele.
Right, okay. What are the big stories you're going to cover now?
Well, we start things off with rugby. Sharks head coach John Plumtree made wholesale changes to his team for tonight's Vodacom United rugby clash with second place Glasgow Warriors. Actually, he's changed his entire starting team with 15 changes made to the side that last weekend beat Edinburgh to advance to the EPCR Challenge Cup semi-final. Most of the players in the new look Sharks have played for the Sharks before, except for the number 8 Nick Hayton, who will be making his debut for the franchise. The Sharks will be overseas until the semi-final, and they play the Scarlets next weekend, with Plumtree expected to return to his top team in that game as a warm-up for the semi-final. In football, AmaZulu will be looking for redemption when they take on Orlando Pirates at the Orlando Stadium on Saturday evening. The two sides faced each other recently in the Nedbank Cup quarter-final, where Orlando Pirates walked away with a 4-2 win against the KZN side. AmaZulu have been struggling to find some consistency in the league so far, and they're sitting 12th while the Buccaneers are third on the log. Elsewhere, Paris Saint-Germain could wrap up the Ligue 1 title as early as next week, which would secure the first trophy of what they would hope to be a historic treble after their comeback victory over Barcelona in the Champions League. Luis Enrique's men host a resurgent Lyon on Sunday, knowing that a win may give them the chance to clinch the title with 4 games to spare when they visit Lorient on Wednesday. PSG's win against Barca set up a semi-final final meet with Borussia Dortmund as they continue to chase a maiden Champions League win, while they also face Lyon in the French Cup final on the 25th of May. Then in motorsport, Red Bull is not in a rush to announce its driver lineup for 2025. This is according to team boss Christian Horner. This is after reports that the champions are in talks with Ferrari's Carlos Sainz, while Max Verstappen has a long-term contract with Red Bull until the end of 2028. Mexican driver Sergio Perez is only contracted with the team until the end of this year. And Perez told reporters yesterday that he hoped to be able to announce his plans for next season in coming weeks, prompting questions regarding his future with Red Bull. Then moving on to women's golf, the prestigious South African Women's Open will add to the illustrious championship history of Erin Vale Country and Golf Estate when this historic tournament is played at one of the top 3 ranked golf courses in the Western Cape, and it's happening from the 25th to the 28th of April. Now, a quality field of Sunshine Tour ladies and Ladies European Tour professionals will challenge for one of South African women's golf's most iconic titles on the fairways of the Erin Vale course that has witnessed some of the most significant moments in the South African game. Then anything's off with athletics as Akani Simbini gears up for the Diamond League in China on the 27th of April. The South African sprinter has his sights set on defending his national title at the ongoing Athletics South Africa Senior Track and Field Championships in Pietermaritzburg. Now, dominating his 2 heats effortlessly, he secured a spot in the final this evening where he stands as the favorite contender for yet another national victory. And it is for the first time this year that he's running the 100-meter event after doing the 1,500-meter and 200-meter in preparations for the national championships.
Today was very tactical. It was just making sure that I'm getting out of the races, I'm putting my phases together, and just making sure that I'm putting it together well. My heat was about my first part of my race. The second semi-final was about the last part of my race, and then tomorrow is about putting it all together. So it's literally just putting the races together and making sure that I'm ready for the final. Just for race preparation, and also not just to put myself into 100 meters so early in the season. Rather do the longest things in the beginning of the season just to get the load in my body, because at that point in time we had trained a lot and the load in the body was a lot. So for me to go out and do a 100 meter and do it at the standard that I want to do with it, it wasn't going to come out, So it was more of training and then coming to today to get my race right so I have to prepare for next week when I'm in China.
All right then, that's it from my side. I'll have more in the next hour.
So there's so much sports happening, and guess what sport I'm focused on this weekend?
Football?
No. I'm focused on paddle, the sport I mentioned to you a few weeks ago. And my partner has hurt his toe, and he's just told me, my paddle partner, because you play doubles, right, that he's out for a month. And my focus this weekend is like, I need to get a partner and I need to play a game because I can't play with him. And that's where my focus is on this weekend.
So you play with a partner. Is this for fun or is it
it's for
a
fun,
tournament?
but it's paddle is normally it's a doubles game. So you need a partner and then against 2 other players. So my partner's out and I'm trying to work out what am I going to do next.
Listen, perhaps someone is listening and just wants to join you as a partner.
You never know. In fact, what's the guy who's got this top 16 Yoba? You know the guy who's running? The top 16 Yoba Awards. I'm sure everybody knows the Patton Brands. Patton Brands has said, Ashraf, please take me to play a game of paddle. Maybe I need to actually call him tonight because he's never played. But he wants to. He said the next coffee we're going to have it at the paddle court. So I'll probably give him a call. Anyway. Okay, that's my sport for the weekend, right?
I am Dion De Vos, the Executive Mayor of Sarah Baartman District Municipality, and I hereby invite you to comment on the draft Integrated Development Plan and Budget for 2024-2025. The draft IDP and budget are available at municipal offices in the 7 local municipalities of the district and on the municipality's website, sarahbartman.co.za. Comments should be sent via email to idp@sbdm.co.za. Comments close on 22nd April 2024.
Royal AM ladies and Lindelani ladies want to showcase who are the real queens of KZN.
They both want out of the bottom half. This is the Hollywood Best Super League. Experience the KZN Derby, Royal AM Ladies FC versus Lindalani Ladies FC on Sunday 21 April at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC1 and SABC radio stations. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Economic news on SAFM. Facts and figures you can count on.
We'll chat to Chris Yelland pretty shortly around, linking, if we can, as we're trying to, no load shedding with the elections. We'll talk about the fireside chat coming up with David van Wyk. Wants to look at the elderly being neglected. You have a thought on that? We're going to look at that too. And by the way, but in fact, before that, before we get to the markets, we spoke about Nestle early on, remember that? So let's get back to the Nestle story with what Petronelle Kruger making the points that she had about Nestle. Well, Nestle themselves have issued a statement, and this is what they say. We uphold stringent regulations and standards within the realm of baby food, ensuring consistency in nutrition, health and wellness principles across all regions in accordance with international guidelines and regulations. This commitment encompasses adherence to labeling requirements, particularly regarding carbohydrate content, which encompasses sugars with full transparency to consumers regarding total sugar content, with slight recipe variations. While slight recipe variations may exist across countries due to factors like regulations, consumer preferences and ingredient availability, these adjustments do not compromise the nutritional integrity of our products designed for infants and young children. We have undertaken significant efforts to minimize sugar content throughout our product range, including the phased removal of added sugars such as sucrose and glucose syrup from our growing up milks for children above 12 months worldwide. Continual innovation and reformulation are core aspects of our approach, ensuring that our products for infants and young children meet local regulations and or international standards, including those set forth by Codex. Our formulations are meticulously crafted with balanced, high-quality ingredients tailored to support the growth and development of children. Our commitment to quality extends to fortifying our milk and cereals for young children with essential vitamins and minerals such as iron to address malnutrition concerns. So think about this. You've got two thoughts. Petronelle Kruger from the Healthy Living Alliance saying she won't even talk to Nestle, and Nestle issuing their statement about sugar content being upped in developing nations. Where do you sit on this one? You can WhatsApp us as always. Probably not enough time to take a call, but maybe if you want to, just take a try. You never know. You can certainly WhatsApp in text or in voice note form. Having said that, let's get to the markets now with Paswani Impatlele rather. Paswani Impatlele was from Markway Fund Managers. Good chatting to you as always. Hi.
Afternoon, Ashraf, friend, to all your listeners. Happy Friday, guys.
Thanks, Paswani. You want to talk about the Purple Group, right?
No, I'm more interested into the market.
Okay, I've got down that Purple Group returning to profits.
Well, Purple Group have come back into profits, and that came from the interim results showing that they've made a profit of 10.9 million rand in profit, coming from a loss of 10.6. That reflected a growth, and that's come at the back of the earlier on results coming out indicating that all thanks to the improvement around client engagement and in terms of having to have seen the strive that they introduced to clients, that has paid off, as they've seen clients are actually given onboarding onto their platforms, and they have more trust. Increasing of active clients were up 12.5. They've also seen the cost or effectiveness as they improve their operational efficiency, and this has seen their biggest generator of revenue driver, their Easy Equity platform, that has also increased their revenue up by 35%. They've seen asset clients management assets under management there by their clients, increasing as equity markets have done fairly well compared to the prior period. And then the guys as an ecosystem, they're continuing to build more platforms such as Easy Retire, Easy Trader, and they're trying to pull all different clients from everywhere to introduce them to these new cheaper ways of trading, which has a positive outlook for them. And the stock traded rather positively to the news.
Okay, and what about then the local and global markets?
Looking at today's markets, we saw developments that showed a lot of nervousness to investors. I mean, early hours of the morning, we saw that news on the attack upon Iran by Israel that increased investors' nervousness around geopolitical tensions, giving into the weekend. This saw oil and gold prices going higher. However, later on, before markets opened, they eased, and this is at the back of Iran seeming to have minimized those effects. And while Ashraf, the other development that is concerning investors is monetary policy speakers have remained rather hawkish, reflecting the higher for longer environment could take place. The market has viewed this as another mistake made by central banks. If you could remember, the other mistake they made was the inflation was transitory, but it seems like not, resulting now in investors rather being safer than sorry, buying some of the dollar to protect themselves. In the meantime, dollar holds its gains to end the week at a 106 level, and with supported by the higher yields. Other concerns we see investors seeing is coming from the quarterly updates from the U.S. corporates that just shining a light to the concern around macroeconomic picture and the outlook regarding the revenue streams going forward. Meanwhile, some other news, we found that UK retail sales remain muted for a second month, reflecting consumer spending is still rather weak as inflationary pressures still exist. And end of the day, Ashraf, we're seeing that it's one of the toughest weeks for investors as we see global indices were for the week down over 2%. We're looking at today, the US market was mixed with the Nasdaq down 0.9, S&P down 0.2, the Dow was up 0.5. Europe sees the FTSE and the CAC rather flat, but the DAX was down 0.5. Back home, the JSE was down 0.2, and this is our resource sector was down 0.3, and industrials and financials rather flat. Looking into the commodity market, we saw gold take a bit, holding some of these gains it had earlier, up 0.3 at $2,386 an ounce on those geopolitical worries. Platinum was down 1.8 at $933 an ounce. Oil was up 0.4 at $87.15 a barrel. Looking at the rand, it has brought back some of those losses. We've seen that went as high as 1922. Now the rand against the dollar is at 1913. Rand against the euro is at 2041, and rand against the pound is 23.83.
Okay, that's it. Well, you have a great weekend. I'm sure we'll talk to you or anybody from your team. You never know, from Markway Fund Managers. So have a great weekend, Paswane. Thanks for that, right? Paswane, of course, from Markway Fund Managers, right? In fact, here's an interesting WhatsApp. Hi, Ashraf, for a pedal partner, you can try your colleague from the other station, Mandy Weeder. She loves it, and she's the one who introduced the listeners to the sport from Tafara. In fact, I've met Mandy on the paddle court. I haven't played, well, with her, but we've watched together. Okay, so there you are. And I agree, she plays a lot of paddle, probably more than me and probably better than me as well.
Nna lebitso la ka ke bonolo mo atlhodi bantswang ba re ke Miss B morara Miss T mo atlhodi the Bonnie P Bonbon, and we'll be now playing Kena on Mondays at 4:30. The day has changed, but the time slot hasn't. So if you're interested in news that's happening with us kids and our peers around the world, don't forget to tune in. See you there.
Five-time champions plan to capitalize on home ground advantage, while 11-time champs have a huge strategy to dominate the battle from the first whistle. This is the first leg of the Total Energies CAF Champions League semi-final. Experience the exhilaration of African football. TP Mazembe FC versus Al Ahly FC, live on SABC1 this Saturday, 20 April at 2:30 p.m. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Ashraf Garda. on SAFM.
Right, we'll chat to Chris Yellen pretty shortly. But we have the fireside chat coming up after 5 o'clock on a Friday. And my guest today is David van Wyk, the lead researcher at the Benchmarks Foundation. David, good to connect with you now, and looking forward to the real fireside chat coming up afterwards, right? Hi.
Hi, Ashraf, and thank you for having me on your fireside chat. I think it's a good idea.
Thank you. Right, but I understand we're going to tease it along, because what is the big issue you want to raise after 5 o'clock?
Well, I would like to talk about old people in our society. You know, we have a lot of space and so on for young people. I just heard an advert on your radio, even a program for children at 4:30 every afternoon. I drive through South Africa quite a lot. I work all over the country and so on. And very often I see old people, indigent, lonely, sometimes in old age homes, sometimes next to the street people and so on. And I just wonder if we pay enough attention to the old people in our lives, whether it is at a personal level or whether it is at a social level. And I have a situation here where I am now. You know, I used to stay in Johannesburg, but my father passed away in 2014 and my brother passed away 2 years ago. My mother's almost 90 years old and she's all by herself. So I decided I would move to Mangaung so that I could be closer to her during this time, because it's becoming increasingly difficult for her. You know, all her peers are gone all her family members are gone. She's exceptionally lonely. And, she's challenged. She's challenged by the new technology. The world is moving on very fast and old people can't keep up and so on.
Yeah.
And, just going to the shops is a big challenge.
And therefore,
what do we do about that?
And then the big question, right? Do we care enough for the elderly? How do we care for our elderly? Well, I'll tell you what, David, we're going to connect about that issue after 5 o'clock. Looking forward to that conversation with you in particular. Thanks for that for now. But I'll tell you what, from an audience point of view, in fact, you can WhatsApp and text right away on that issue. Do we care enough for our elderly? How should we care for them? Part of our fireside conversation coming up after 5. 0614 104 107. In fact, if you message me now, we'll probably start talking about it very, very quickly as we get into the show. Tumi, you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I think with us, in our culture, you have to take care of your parents. It's just that usually they would, for example, I'm married, and if my parents are old, I wouldn't take them to an old age home. They'll come and live with us, and I will have to take care of them. And it's just a way of us just giving back to them, taking care of us while we were young.
So the suggestion, not necessarily from David, but that could well come through, that often there's neglect of older people. You don't see that, not where you come from.
Not from my point of view, but some people, I've heard stories of where they don't take care of their parents generally. But I just know in our culture, and Gemotswana, and you have to take care of the elderly because they helped you grow up.
And as you say that, you say it with a broad smile on your face, which is a smile of clearly affection for your parents. Absolutely. Well,
and
we'll talk
grandparents.
And grandparents. Well, we'll talk about that. Probably give you my perspective as well on all of those things, right? Coming up on the National Pulse later on. 086 000 2032 if you could call in. WhatsApp, text or voice notes 0614 104 107. The elderly, how do you care for them? How should we be caring for them? Do you care for your parents, grandparents? Well, I mean, care as in look after. We'll talk about that as part of our fireside chat. Do you care for the fact that there's no load shedding for 23 days? Of course it's about the elections, isn't it? Maybe not. Let's make sense of it with energy expert Chris Yellen. Chris, hi.
Hi, good afternoon to you and your listeners.
Thank you, right. So, okay, I think it's about, 23 days, right? And you know and I know there's been speculation around the country from different people at homes. They're more interested in that than the election, which is how long will we continue life without load shedding? And your answer?
Well, firstly to say that I've heard all these conspiracy theories that this is an election ploy and that it's all politics at work. But to be honest, I don't buy that for 1 minute. One really has to look at the data. And the data tells the story. And the reality is that there has been a noticeable and consistent reduction of unplanned breakdowns in the Eskom fleet for the first 15 weeks of this year compared to the same period last year. That's a very good thing. It means that there is more generation available to meet demand, and it also means that there is some space available for Eskom to do very much needed maintenance, additional maintenance, because there is more generation available. And Eskom, the data again shows that in this period, first 15 weeks of this year, the level of planned maintenance has been noticeably higher than for the same period last year. Again, that's a good thing. In the medium term, it means that there's going to be an improvement, one would hope, in the actual performance of the plant because it is being better maintained.
Okay, now if you're saying that, then in fact what you are saying is let's acknowledge in the first instance the role of key decision makers and management within Eskom, isn't it?
Yeah, not only within Eskom, but certainly within Eskom, but also at the National Energy Crisis Committee, in government, who have actually instituted some reforms which have made a very big difference. And just to give you some examples, you may remember that there used to be a 1 megawatt limit. Above that, you needed a license from the regulator to install new generation capacity. That has been done away with. There is now no longer any limit. So new generation can come on stream much quicker. And it is coming on stream quicker, from residential through to commercial, industrial, mining, and agricultural sector are all private sector is bringing to the grid significant new generation capacity, and it's making itself felt. There is a huge pipeline now.
So which means there's a growing economy. I'm looking at the example of fixed line telephones historically, where we all had them. I don't have one at home now, okay, because I've migrated to a mobile phone, right? So what has happened to the fixed line industry? It's just died off, or it's diminished considerably. So you're saying, in fact, we're seeing something similar. It's happened because of cause. As a result of that, there's a bigger emphasis on renewables and other forms of energy, and therefore, in fact, there's less demand for what there always was a demand for. Is that how I should be seeing it?
Yes, absolutely. Firstly, though, I must just say it's not a case that the economy is growing. Unfortunately, the low growth in the economy and the move away from a very energy-intensive economy to more of a services and lighter manufacturing base is actually reducing the demand for electricity. So not only are we bringing these alternative sources to the grid, which is helping, but unfortunately, let's not, put some emotional context to this, but just say the reality is that demand for electricity from Eskom is decreasing, also because of the weak economy and the fact that that we're moving towards a less energy-intensive economy, coupled with self-generation by users of electricity. It's all working towards a reduction on the pressure being put on the Eskom grid. It's relieving Eskom of a burden which it has not been able to meet properly for the last several years.
Simple thing. Less usage, less demand for usage. Means less usage and less pressure. Got that right. Now, just answer this one. The initial point, the theory that how has Eskom got this right now, considering we are now 6 weeks away from an election and they've never been able to get it before, and therefore the conspiracy that we spoke about earlier on, that clearly this is just to win an election.
Well, look, politics does come into this. The looming election, I think, together with the crisis that we have in energy, has really galvanized, Eskom and government to start attending to the problem. You see, there's nothing like a good crisis to focus the mind, especially when there's an election coming up and the ruling party stands to lose a lot of votes if it does not get this matter right. So, yes, this is the good part about democracy. It puts pressure and accountability on politicians to deliver what they should always deliver.
We should have an election every 6 months if that's the case. Okay. Yeah. Here's the last thing. I mean, you are more enlightened on this issue than I am. Is there, the big question we're always asking now is like, so when is this going to stop? Do you have any insider information about, this could actually change next week? And I hope you're wrong.
Look, I'm not a fortune teller or a soothsayer. I can't predict the future accurately, nor can Eskom, nor can the minister, and nor can politicians. So when politicians, predict that load shedding will end by the end of this year, well, they predicted that last year and the year before, and they were wrong. And really, one needs to take these things from whence they come. They are coming from politicians before an election, making promises, and promises by politicians before an election are notorious for their inaccuracy and the fact that they are over-optimistic. And so, whilst I cannot predict the future, the reality is that there is significant new generation coming onto the grid, which is releasing the burden on Eskom. And Eskom is putting a lot of attention to improving its performance and the fleet in general. And it is helping as we speak.
And for those who found the light, well, enjoy it. Chris Yellen, thanks for your time. Certainly a nice segue into the weekend with that issue about Eskom. Right, let's get the news now. It's 5 o'clock with Greg House.
Thank you, Ashraf. Western Cape government considering administration for Knysna and probe into Kenya military helicopter crash. Good day to you. The Western Cape government is considering placing the Knysna municipality in the Garden Route region under administration. The provincial government had recently filed criminal charges against the municipality for allegedly failing to adequately respond and implement waste removal plans. This follows ongoing service delivery problems and allegations of fraud and corruption. The municipality has until the 23rd of this month to respond to the province with a viable solution. Knysna Municipal Manager Umbali Sebola.
The situation has improved. The whole area of the northern area, they are having water. So the waste, yes, we have the issue with the transfer station recently, where we are unable to compact our waste at the waste station. But that doesn't stop us from then collecting our waste from our wards. We are collecting our waste. And then with regard to the spillage, that has been a thorny issue. We have recently refurbished the pumps at the sewer pump station.
The SIU has been granted authority to probe allegations of serious maladministration in the Department of Water and Sanitation following a proclamation by the President. The probe aims to recover financial losses suffered by the state. It allows the SIU to look into unauthorized, irregular and wasteful expenditure incurred by the department. The unit will also establish if there was any unlawful appropriation of expenditure of public money. SIU spokesperson Kaiser Kanyahu.
Causes of such maladministration arising from the procurement of or contracting of goods, works or services concerning the blog project and the contract entered into in respect thereof between the department and Sidibeng Water, the almost empty outdoor campaign and the appointment of Sidibeng Water as the implementing agent in an allegedly irregular manner for the provision of generic services in 2016. The War on Leaks program and the alleged irregular appointment of Rand Water and the Energy and Water Sector Education and Training Authority.
16-year-old girl who was standing at the gates of the Belgravia High School in Athlone on the Cape Flats has been killed in a suspected gang-related shooting. Police spokesperson Andre Trout says another man was also killed in the area.
The Athlone community is encouraged to assist police with information that will deliver the suspects who are responsible for an incident which claimed the life of an innocent schoolgirl this afternoon. With scant regard for the lives of others, rival gangs fired several shots randomly at around 12:30, killing a 20-year-old man in Canal Road in Athlone. A 16-year-old girl who was standing at the gates of Belgravia High School in Flay Road was caught in the crossfire.
Investigating officer in the Senzo Mayua case, Sergeant Bato Mahola, says she issued and executed a warrant of arrest for accused number 3, Carlos Ngube, on the 26th of October 2020. Mahola has been recalled to the stand at the High Court in Pretoria. Ngube is one of 5 accused in the 2014 murder of the Bafana Bafana soccer player. Mahola issued the warrant of arrest for Ngube at Johannesburg prison, where he's serving a sentence in a different case.
And, my lord, when I got to the Johannesburg prison, my lord, I made arrangement that, my lord, he be called in order for me to execute the warrant of arrest, in which, my lord, I did execute the warrant of arrest, and, my lord, informed accused number 3 of his constitutional rights. He further, my lord, asked me to share the evidence that we have against him. I then, my lord, informed him that at the right time, my lord, there will be a disclosure of the dockets.
Kenya's government sent a team to probe the helicopter crash that killed the military chief of the country, Francis Ogola, and 9 others. It was not immediately clear what caused the crash. Ogola was among 12 occupants of the military aircraft that went down yesterday afternoon, shortly after takeoff in the northwest of the country. The bodies were flown to Nairobi, and the 2 survivors are in hospital. The 4-star general will be buried this weekend at his home in the west of the country. The top story, the Western Cape government is considering placing the Knysna municipality in the Garden Route region under administration. That's SAFM News. I'm Greg Kos.
In your sports this hour, Bulls captain out for the rest of the season and Beijing marathon runners stripped of medals after a controversial finish. More details at 5:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good afternoon. Starting off in Gauteng, the N1 northbound in Sunninghill has a crash reported at Rivonia Road. Houghton Drive southbound in Parktown has delays at Newton Street. Fitkoppen Road westbound in Johannesburg North has a crash reported at Market Street, and Winnie Mandela Drive northbound in Hurlingham has delays towards Peter Place. And then Mabopane Highway southbound in Pretoria, a fatal pedestrian crash at the Hairpin Bend causing delays. In KZN, the N2 southbound is slow moving towards Spaghetti Junction. The M7 westbound is queuing at Bel Air Wakesley Road Junction. The N2 northbound has a stationary vehicle just before the M41 Gateway exit, and the N3 westbound in Pietermaritzburg has a stationary truck after Ashburton exit. In Cape Town, Wetton Road eastbound is slow moving. That's through the central Wetton area, and Brighton Road in Kraaifontein is slow moving at the N1 highway. Turfel Road in Athlone is slow moving near the M7 highway, and the N1 outbound is slow moving towards Okavango Road exit. With your traffic update, I'm Irma G.
The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda on SAFM. You're listening to the National Pulse, weekdays 3 to 6 p.m.
Right, so we're going to chat to David van Wyk pretty shortly. He's the lead researcher at the Benchmarks Foundation, and specifically, we're going to talk about how do we care for the elderly. I mean, that's the issue he wants to raise, and he's suggesting that far too many people, I think, do not live with their parents or grandparents, and they leave them effectively to fend for themselves. So, you have any thoughts on that? I'd love to know. You can, in fact, you can WhatsApp voice note right away, text or voice note 0614 104 107. In fact, you can also call into 086 000 2032. Let me tell you, there's a range of other comments that we've had on other issues, including, the United Nations and other things. We're not going to play them quite now. We need to get into the issue of our fireside chat that we do every Friday, and the question is, do we care enough for the elderly, or do we see too many examples of people moving to Australia and New Zealand and maybe other places, dumping their parents in old age homes? The question is, are you one of them? What's your plan regarding your parents or grandparents when you are physically able and they clearly not? What's your plan with them? You tell me. In fact, we'll talk to David van Wyk right after this.
The Northwest Legislature's Portfolio Committee on Premier, Finance, Corporate Governance, Human Settlement and Traditional Affairs, led by Honorable Aaron Motswana, will embark on public hearings throughout the province on the Division of Revenue Bill B4 2024 and Northwest Appropriation Bill on the 19th April at Ngangamudil Mulema District in Tukrani Community Hall, at Dr. Kenneth Kaunda District in Banquet Hall Potchefstroom, at Dr. Ruth Somuti Mombati in Kismet Community Hall in Vryburg, at Bojanala District in Moretele Municipality Hall. All hearings start at 10.
Match day number 30 will deliver high emotions and tension. 14th and 15th placed VfL Wolfsburg and VfL Bochum must go beyond their limits in the final stretch. Who will climb the ladder to victory? This is the Bundesliga. Football as it's meant to be. Catch VfL Wolfsburg versus VfL Bochum this Saturday, 20 April at 3 p.m. Live on SABC3. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
You are listening to the National Pulse with Ashraf Garda.
Right, on a Friday we have this fireside chat in the last, 35, 40 minutes. It's a pretty cool chat, and often we get a guest on board and we leave it to them, in fact, to decide on the topic that they want to talk about. And by and large, that's the way it goes. So it's very much this chat between myself and him or her, and then we rope you in, and we all just chat about somehow an issue that we think that would really get us thinking about and pick our brains, and clearly we have opinions on, but often it's very societal. In many ways it's light-hearted, but sometimes it's pretty serious. Last week we spoke about the high cost of, did we speak about that? The high cost of burials, I think it was, just and the performances that people have at funerals. That was last week, okay? Today, let's find out more. David van Wyk, lead researcher at the Benchmarks Foundation. David, great that you're part of this fireside chat. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, and good afternoon to your listeners, and thank you for a good program. I think it's a great idea.
Much appreciated. Of course, you have the disadvantage today of not being seated next to me. Normally, it's like you're next to me and you partly co-host the show as well, so it's slightly different this time around. But the issues will remain, right?
Absolutely. I think the issues remain.
Yeah.
We're a very diverse society with very diverse cultures and very diverse ways of treating elderly people.
Yeah, well, so let me ask you this. I mean, so we'll leave it to you to raise an issue, okay? And you've come up with this topic of do we care enough for the elderly? So why this topic?
Well, I think it's an important topic because I was a very difficult child to rear. I was always at odds with my culture, at odds with my parents and their politics and the way they saw the world. I saw it in a very different way. And both my brother and I grew up splitting very far away from them ideologically. And this obviously created a hell of a lot of tensions. But what I do respect them for is that they allowed us to.
Okay, we've just lost a connection just for the moment there. As David says, they allowed us to. I tell you what, while we're reconnecting with him, it doesn't mean we can't connect with you. So perhaps you want to contribute to that conversation about the elderly. In fact, we had a chat, and someone sent a message sort of off air to say, do not play this one. It's like, I do not like the fact that elderly people are on their own shopping. And you know what? They're all on their own. They have no idea how to buy their groceries. They get things wrong, and they bump their trolleys into me, and they knock my ankles, and I have to say, hey, now, and I don't like that. That's one person with one opinion about the elderly. So you turn that around. What do you think about how we should deal with the elderly? In this case here, it's probably people over 80, I would think, much older, and how society manages them. How do you do so in your family and in your cultures as well? Because I understand there can be cultural differences, cultural nuances around that. David, we lost you for a moment, and I'd asked you to motivate why, and you mentioned the philosophical differences you had with your parents, right? In fact, I think we've still lost that. David, do we have you there? No, that connection's just slightly out. I'll tell you what, while we're at it, there are just some thoughts that I want to pick up on the issue of the issues we've had around other issues. So Tafara is saying, Ashraf, when it comes to international politics, it'd be hypocritical of us South Africans to call out the duplicity of the USA without doing the same with our very own government. Just making this point. And another one on that same issue, can this extra electricity be transmitted to our poor infrastructure. I think that was really the issue, isn't it? There's a couple more. In fact, some people have sent some pictures. So again, wherever you may be in the country, where are you? In fact, where are you in the country right now? Tell me where you are. Tell me what you do. And love it, as you've done sometimes last week. Sent a picture of you locked onto SAFM radio. If you do that with, whatever the dial is in your city, because, being a national station, we cut across throughout the country, so the meter band is not just one thing, okay? Hopefully we will connect to our guest, David van Wyk, as we get him on the ringside or the fireside chat right after this.
Hi, I'm Khomotso KG Mweketi, and I believe in music's ability to connect, to heal, to remind, and to bring joy. And each week on my Saturday and Sunday show Seasons right here on SAFM, I endeavor to do just that. So join the movement of Seasons every Saturday and Sunday, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. It's addictive. You might invite a friend. Seasons, only on SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide, with me, KG Mweketi.
Freedom Month on SAFM, the month in which we had our first democratic election 30 years ago. This Freedom Month, as we reflect on the progress made thus far, we continue to commemorate the selfless sacrifices made for our democracy and freedom. SAFM, leading the conversation. You are listening to the National Pulse with Ashraf Garda.
All right, we will connect with David van Wyk in a moment, but he's already raised the issue of, do we care enough for the elderly? And you've heard some people to say we love them, we must care for them. Tumi has made the point to say it's in our culture, you have to look after the elderly, the parents, the grandparents. Then you get the flip side, somebody else says, man, they make me sick in the aisles, you're just not knowing how to shop, and I don't know why they shop on their own. What do you make of all of that? Here's a voice note.
Hi, Ashraf, Joe from Durban. When does the process of wanting to care for your parents actually start? When they're already 70, 80? It's about religion, cultural values as well. If one looks at the Western movies, it's almost imprinted in you that if you, sitcoms, etc., that if you finish the equivalent of matric and you still live with your parents, you're a sissy. I know from personal experience during university, when white students would still look at the Indian students, for example, and they would say, they could afford living on their own or in res, but chose to remain with their parents. They were looked upon as sissies, mummies, boys. So the cultural values start from there, and independence from your parents, and it's enforced via the cultural importation or colonialism of our mind via these movies.
Okay, that's a point. When does it actually start? When do you start caring enough for your parents? I suppose it's a time, you obviously care for them for the rest of your life, but the point is you care more for them at a time when their dependence, there's a tipping point. At a certain moment in life, the parents depend on you more than you depend on them. For example, maybe one of the parents needs to go to hospital and you need to take them to the hospital and you need to sit with them the whole day and they're struggling along and therefore they can't work. At that point in time, you would need to be caring more for them than they would historically have cared for you, isn't it? But the other point that caller is raised, and I think you're right, it does differ from cultures to culture. In certain cultures, it's the norm to vacate the household ASAP. In many of the black cultures, African cultures, and I think Asian cultures, whether it's Asian, I would take it Asian Hindu, Asian Muslim, and other parts of the world, the focus is on the parents are part of your life no matter what. That somebody, there are old age homes, but I think they are the exception to the norm, isn't it? That you embrace they're part of your core and they will always be part of your core. And they will live with one of the family members, with one of the children. That's the norm. Okay, let's get David van Wyk back on the line, but let's get your thoughts as well on caring for the elderly. How do you do it in your homes? Can you share some examples that you have? It could be you, it could be your family members, and maybe they're anonymous. If you want to do that, that's fine. But, the pluses and the minuses, the great joys, but also, as some have suggested, the nuisance, of having to care for the elderly, or seeing them shopping and seeing them in place, driving cars like at 40 kilometers an hour when they should be driving at 60 or 70 or whatever. So share your thoughts with me. David, good to connect with you once again. Right. So you're there, right, David?
Yeah, I'm here. I can hear you clearly.
So,
Thank you.
We lost you. I mean, earlier on when you made the point about the disconnection or philosophical difference with your parents. So can you talking about that? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, I grew up in a very Protestant culture, and Protestant culture, you have to look after yourself. You don't have, like in Catholic culture, huge families that are looking after one another and so on. So my mother, now she's close to 90 years old, and she actually bought herself a house in an old age village. Okay, and that's where she stays in Mangaung. But she has problems there, and she left the big house of the family empty because my brother died 2 years ago. And so I've moved into the big house, and I constantly have to take care of her needs. And she has very peculiar needs because of her age and because of her hearing loss. For example, she would lock herself into a room and then lose the key in the room, and I would have to drive over there and go and unlock it. Or she would phone me at 2:30 in the morning, telling me her phone is not working, but it's the phone that she's calling me on. And so I think with deafness there comes a certain degree of dementia and so on as well with old people. But if I think back of all the trouble that I was as a child and how difficult it must have been to raise me, I really shouldn't complain about her difficulties. She keeps on apologizing and she keeps on saying she hopes she's not a burden and so on. And she really isn't a burden. And I feel very almost hurt when she says, I hope I'm not a burden, because I'm quite sure that I was a burden as a child, with my political views. I was a rebel. I was naughty at school and so on. I did all the things that they didn't expect me to do. And so, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Carry on.
Yeah, no. So I think that I have to be patient with her now, and one really has to be friendly because, these are the kind of last days. It's a sunset of a person's life, and you don't want to feel rejected. You don't want to feel alone. You don't want to feel as if nobody cares anymore. When you spend a whole life caring for others, you really have to consider old people for that very reason. And I know that in African culture there's a veneration of elders and also of ancestors and so on. But I do see, unfortunately, young girls getting pregnant and dropping off the babies with grandma and so on and disappearing into the night and not to be seen until the kids are much older and so on. Although there are cultural differences, I do still think that there's massive neglect of elderly people in this country.
Well, I mean, I think you're right. And your example about even the children, the grandchildren now, they look after. I mean, the reality, and this is across many cultures where, husband and wife, so they have children now, and the couple are both working. So even at that stage where you would think that the parents would have moved on and have their empty nest now, they then are forced through circumstances, and maybe they probably want to, but they are forced through circumstances to look after now the grandchildren effectively as like their adopted children, as their own children, then get to work, which means that their absolute feet up retirement age, really speaking, is far later in life than one would have imagined otherwise, right? But I mean, there's a couple of more. There's messages that I've got. I want to pick out. Ashraf, my family told me to put my 84-year-old mother in the homes. I look after her. She was bedridden, and she has passed on now. Thank you. Well, I mean, good on you that you looked after her, isn't it? But, again, I'm not in that position. My parents have both passed on. Father died at 69. Mother died at 84. And the reality is, what my values are and how we do it as a family and how you do it are not the same. And we don't always know the circumstances. So let's go back to you then, David. I mean, is there a societal norm that we should have? With regard to...
Well, I think that our society is changing very, very quickly, and even people who do hold to traditional culture and so on are under pressure from the market and so on. Just to survive is very difficult. It's very expensive, and to have the burden of an old person it adds to that expense. So it is the market which basically drives a wedge between children and their parents. Forgetting that, of course, that parents were the ones who, under very difficult circumstances, even under apartheid and so on, had to look after children and raise them. People now become middle class, and when they become middle class, they become isolated. They become nuclear families. They no longer have the extended family, and people complain about the black tax and so on, and I complain about perhaps the burden that my mother would have on me in terms of expenses and things like that, driving out to her every day and so on. It's costly with the petrol price and so on, what it is. And I think that we need to have a society, a caring society, not just at the individual level, but also perhaps at the state level, where we cannot afford this rampant market dominance that we are having at the moment. And we really, really have to look at ways to look after one another, whether we are looking after our children, our grandchildren, or whether we're looking after our parents and grandparents. We really have to come together and be more caring.
Interesting. That's not an election manifesto item, is it? I'm trying to think if any other parties have said so. I don't think there's one.
Well, I don't think so. The thing that worries me about the manifestos is that these issues are actually not raised, and they are the issues that households face. And those are the issues around which you could actually mobilize and move the population forward in a manner that is meaningful. The election manifestos for me are rather empty, and I see that this is a very suppressed election. I don't see the number of banners and things like that out. I don't see the number of rallies, and I don't see, 5-6 years ago, the EFF was mobilizing the youth left, right, and center. Other parties that split off from the ANC were raising their complaints about the dominant party and so on. This year, it's very much dampened. I don't know if they don't have sufficient resources or what the issue is, but there are certainly many issues that we need to deal with, and one of the issues we need to deal with is care for the aged in our society. And I picked up an old man next to the street, and I gave him a room in my house because he was indigent and he was being, brutalized on the street. Because people don't like poor people, they don't like street people, and so on. I don't think that we should look at how do we restore human dignity in our society.
Well, I think there you are, and the question is how come it's not an election agenda item? I'm quite surprised. You may want to connect and chat to my guest, David van Wyk, as part of this fireside chat every Friday, but today it's about the elderly, the aged. How do we look after them? Do we look after them? Does that differ? What's your personal experience about your household, your parents, your grandparents? You could even be that older person yourself, right? And as we've already heard from David, when someone's like 90-something, that point that they say often, I don't want to be a burden to you. And I hear that far more often. And how do you respond to that, or would you rather that you love your parents or grandparents, but honestly they are occupying your space, and if you could, you'd rather have them in another space, isn't it? There's some voice notes. Let's pick them up. In fact, we just having this. Let's see if we can. Okay, we're having this technical issue with sorting out these voice notes, and hopefully we get Phineas to sort it out ASAP, right? But there's more. There's some, but you can call in. That's 086 000 2032. In terms of text messages, there's a couple more about older people, and there's others like Foster Machete on the N3 from Durban to Joburg. Certainly got you, because that question we've asked: where are you listening from? Where are you listening to the National Pulse? Where in the country are you from? Listening in and share that, and if you can, share the SAFM dial when you're listening in a picture form. Well, that's absolutely great. So, Foster, thanks for that. Thanks for that picture, Foster. Okay, back then to you, David. So, what about the rest of your family? You talk about you and your mother, right? And I take it.
Well, we were 3 kids, and my sister stayed with my parents her whole life through, and she's working at a hospital now in Bloemfontein. But she works all day long. I work from home since COVID. and I can do my work from home. Every now and again, I dash off to a mining company and I go and look at what's going on in the mine community and things like that. But for the rest of the time, I write reports and do, that kind of work. And so I have more time available to be able to go out whenever there's a call and a need. For example, my mother struggles with switching on her TV, because the remotes and the technology and so on is just too much for her. And very often she calls me in tears because she can't get the TV on and she's lonely, and that's the only thing that she can actually engage with. And I have to drive over there and go and switch on the TV for and fix it and so on and explain to her how it works. But that doesn't help because by tomorrow she will have forgotten how that actually works. But to get back to the issue of the election,
on the TV part, like, what sort of conversation then do you have with her when she gives you a call? I'm sure panic-stricken, and then you go to her aid and then explain what sort of conversation takes place.
Well, she gets very paranoid and she gets very irritated with herself and so on, and she becomes panic-stricken, and I constantly have to say to her, Ma, calm down. It's an easy issue for us to resolve. I will resolve the issue for you. You don't have, but I don't want to be a burden. I'm so sorry that I had to call you. And, she becomes she frets and so on. The other night when she locked herself in a room and she couldn't get out of the room, and I went there to go and open the room for her, she kept on pulling at the door while I was trying to open it from the other side in complete panic because she thought she was going to be stuck in that room. And we've told her many times, don't lock the room. If something happens to you in this room and we have an emergency, then we can't get to you. So please deal with that particular issue. Now, with regard to my older brother, he was staying in Bloemfontein.
Okay, maybe just pause on the older brother because I want to get the older brother's story as well. But let me again invite you listening in to say share your you and parents stories, share your you and grandparents stories, share you and your granduncles and aunts. All those people, the goggles that we often hear about. Share all those stories and particularly across the cultures, because I understand that they would differ. We'll continue chatting to David van Wyk as part of our Fireside feature in a moment. Let's get the news headlines now. It's 5:30.
Quick look at the headlines. 3 suspects have been arrested by police in connection with the murders of a Rand Water executive and his bodyguard. The Western Cape government is considering placing the Knysna municipality under administration, and the Italian court has thrown out charges against 10 defendants from charity rescue organisations accused of aiding and abetting people smugglers. There's a full update at the top of the hour.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good afternoon. Starting off in Gauteng, the N1 northbound in Sunninghill has a crash at Rivonia Road. Marlborough Drive eastbound has a crash at Senior Drive. In Pretoria, Mabopane Highway southbound has a fatal pedestrian crash reported at the Hairpin Bend, and that's causing delays. And Linwood Road eastbound has a crash reported at Solomon Mhlangu Drive. In KZN, the N2 northbound has a stationary vehicle before the M41 gateway exit. The N2 northbound has a stationary vehicle at Spaghetti Junction. The N3 westbound has a crash before Pavilion Shopping Centre, and in Cape Town, the N2 outbound and Somerset West has a crash before Hazelden Drive. The N2 inbound has a stationary vehicle near the airport runway. Albert Road in Salt River is slow moving at Lower Main Road. And an update from Metro Rail regarding the Southern Line. There are no trains available between Muizenberg and Fisher due to storm damage. With your traffic update, I'm Irma G.
This is SAFM Sports with Tuming Kapele.
All right, the weekend is here.
The weekend is here, but I'm going to start off with a reminder that it's 98 days to go to the Paris Olympics. And don't forget that you can catch all the action on SABC Sport, and it's happening from the 26th of July to the 11th of August. Something that you're not excited about, huh? Ashraf?
The Olympic Games?
Yes.
Well, no, I will watch it. In fact, I will definitely watch the Olympic Games.
Please do.
What I'm not likely to do, I must say that, I can't say never, is I'm not likely to go on an expenses trip that I would pay for overseas, right? Because we're not hosting it, to watch the Olympic Games, because then I'd rather watch other sporting events, like team sports. So I won't say no, but I'll definitely watch the Olympics. I've got some favorites, weightlifting amongst them, by the way.
I love athletics. But let's look at what's happening in the world of rugby. The Bulls were dealt a massive blow with the news that captain Marcel Coetzee is out of the rest of the season. Coetzee, who didn't accompany the rest of his side as they travelled to England last weekend for the Investec Champions Cup clash against Northampton Saints, instead went on for an operation on his knee, and he's out for the rest of the season. In athletics, the top three in Beijing half marathon have been stripped of their medals following an investigation into the finish that saw China's He Jie questionably win. He crossed the line first in a bizarre finish after the Kenyans Robert Keta and Willie Mnagat and Dejene Hailu from Ethiopia seemed to be or to deliberately allow him to win. Now, Mnagat told the BBC that the African trio were pacemakers, although their bibs did not say that. The race investigation said that Mnagat, Kita and Hailu had not been properly registered as pacemakers for He, so their actions on the finish line breached competition rules. In football, Kaizer Chiefs forward Ashley Dupree says that nothing less than 3 points will do against struggling Richards Bay, and the game is on Sunday. Amakosi are enduring a tough DStv Premiership campaign, and they head into this weekend's league clash 8th on the log. They have not won a game in their last 4 encounters since defeating Golden Arrows in March, losing 3 and drawing once while failing to score in the last 3 outings. The Natal Rich Boys are 13 points worse off 15th place with just 4 wins all season. Then in cricket, India captain Rohit Sharma has thrown his support behind any resumption of Test cricket against arch rivals Pakistan, saying that it would be awesome. Now, the South Asian neighbours are bitter political adversaries and have fought 3 wars against each other since 1947. Now, the cricket teams have not faced off in a Test since 2007. Instead, they play only occasionally in the shorter versions of the game and usually on neutral territory in international tournaments. Then in motorsport, Lando Norris beat Lewis Hamilton to take pole position for the sprint race at the Chinese Grand Prix in a hectic wet session. The McLaren driver had his fastest lap time deleted and then reinstated in the final minutes of the session as he beat Hamilton by 1.261 seconds. Hamilton's Mercedes headed Fernando Alonso's Aston Martin by 0.71 seconds as Max Verstappen finished 4th. The Red Bull driver made errors on 2 laps before sneaking in at the end. On that note, it is a wrap from my side. I will be back on Monday for SAFM Sport.
And on Monday, it'll be, 96 days or something like that to the Olympic Games. So also keeping a note of that. Thank you. Have a great weekend, right?
You too.
In fact, there's a question. In fact, someone said, Ashraf, I'm home, sweet home in Orlando West, frustrated by a massive loss of water outside my gate, probably from leaking pipes and from 2 days unable to get hold of Joburg water. Jeff in Orlando West. And there's more about people commenting. Kat, I think it's Kat from Peter Marisburg saying, David, just take Mum's keys away and maybe also write down the TV remote instructions and stick them on the wall for her to refer to so she can have some autonomy. I'm glad you didn't say Google her. Tell her to YouTube or something. I'm glad you did not say that. Let's get to the money markets now, as always, hosted by Jimmy Moyaha from the MoneyWeb Market Update. Jimmy, big stories today?
Good afternoon, Ashraf. Good afternoon, Jimmy. Good afternoon to the listeners. Not much today. Markets seem to be digesting some of the developments throughout the week. If we start with equity markets, Asian markets were sort of all in the red. So Tokyo was down about 2.6%, Sydney down about a full percent, Hong Kong a full percent as well there. European markets were quite mixed, with London up about 0.25%, the CAC 40 in France sitting kind of flat, Germany down about 0.5%. US markets you'd think would be in the green, but it seems only the Dow Jones is in the green by 0.5%. The S&P down 1/3, and the Nasdaq down a full percent in that regard. If we take a look at some currency movements, the rand fighting back against the dollar, clawing back a bit of the ground that it lost yesterday, sitting at 19 Rand 10, so still above 19 Rand. Concerningly there for the petrol price announcements, we're likely to hear from the Central Energy Fund soon. And then if we look at the Rand against the pound, gaining back about 0.2% at 23.71 against the euro, 20 Rand and 37 cents. The local markets didn't fare so badly this time around. The all share up about 0.1%, with the top 40 up about almost 0.2%. Industrials were leading that, up about 0.33%. Financials also had a bit of a good showing, up about 0.1%. Resources were kind of flat. If we have a look at some of the market counters that moved around throughout the day, the guys that had a really good day were the likes of Barlow World, that was up about 3.2%. Alexander Forbes up about 2.7%. RMB, Tungela was up as well. RCL was up. We Buy Cars had a good trading day. They're still trading around that 20 Rand range that they listed at. So it's 20 Rand 43, I think they closed out at. Some of the guys that didn't have such a good day, though, were the likes of Copper 360, the Purple Group, Sabanye, Calgro, Raubex, Motus, all suffering on today's trade and not closing out the week very strongly. If we look at how the commodities are likely to close, gold is very close to $2,400 an ounce again, sitting at $2,390 an ounce. Brent crude seemingly climbing back up about 0.33% at $87.38 a barrel there. Platinum is back below $1,000 at $941. It's been there for quite some time. Palladium at $1,030, and we'll have to keep an eye on these going into next week, because next week we are likely to see a bit more volatility in US markets. If we look at the earnings numbers that are expected to come out, we've got Visa, Tesla, Microsoft, Alphabet, IBM, all expected to give us earnings numbers next week. So it should make for an interesting day on the equities front next week, and we'll keep an eye out, obviously, over the weekend around the tensions in the Middle East. It seems as though these developments take place over weekends. We saw that the last weekend is what gave sort of rise to this weekend. So we'll keep an eye on that and catch up with the listeners next week. Back to you, Ashraf.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Right. Yeah. Good weekend starting now for you, Jimmy Moya from MoneyWeb, right? In fact, we'll get to continue talking about old age, the elderly, and what you feel about it. Someone actually said, with some mischief making, to say, you know what? So many of the politicians must also understand that they can't be politicians any longer. They're too old. Anyway, we'll see what happens during election time. We'll continue talking to David van Wyk as part of our fireside chat on how do we deal with the elderly. And I particularly want your stories. We'll get to Madida as well in a moment.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Okay, let's see. In fact, before we get to Madida, let's play some of those voice notes that you sent earlier, and keep them coming. The voice notes, keep the calls coming. But really, it's not like a heavy academic debate. What it is you're sharing your own experiences of family, and particularly if you're older now, how did you transition from being younger to much older, and now suddenly you need the assistance of your children or grandchildren for the most mundane things, basic things, I should say. And the other one is maybe you're still younger, but you have someone that you now have to look after. And how are you coping with all of that? Okay, here's some voice notes.
Tell me where you are.
Hello, Ashraf.
Love it.
I don't know why you're saying over 80 is old when we've got people who are over 80 running for president in this country, and most of them still in parliament. So I think maybe we should use 90 instead of 80.
In fact, I just touched on that before I heard your voice. No, but the fact is there are people in Parliament who are older, and let's see what happens to them, election time or not. Thanks for that call. Here's another voice note.
Ashraf, I just want to make a comment. It's very sad when you see people putting the elderly in an old age home. The reason why I'm saying that is sad. Sometimes they don't even get a phone call or a happy birthday message from their children. And it's very sad. That is something that is very sad. This comes from Terence.
Okay, let's talk about old age homes, by the way. I mean, should it be that they must go to an old age home because they actually get better support? Or is that something that your community and your culture shuns? I think many communities shun the whole concept of old age homes, so they keep the parents either living alone or they live with you, but then they are unable to provide the type of comforts day to day that older person, parent, grandparent actually needs. And if you have any thoughts about that, so I'm sure David does, but you can certainly tell me. Let's get to Madida from Butterworth. Hi, Madida.
Yes, good afternoon, Asaf. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I certainly can. Go ahead.
Okay. You know what? I have a problem with your labor relations laws. The way they define family, they exclude like your parents. Like your parents won't form part of the definition of family for family responsibility leave purposes. So much that people, when they have to look after their parents, probably they have to take annual leave. If they don't have annual leave, there is no special leave that is meant for looking after the elderly people or parents. Now, that's the point that I just wanted to raise, concurring then with what David is saying, that the market is really putting pressure on us to not look after the elderly.
Okay, how important is that? I think that's such an important point you raise. That often nowadays companies are very on side with regard to maternity leave and paternity leave when a couple has a new child, but newborn child. But in this case here, it's just as important, isn't it? But could it be that, let's say, businesses can't afford it, that they can't afford to give you extra time to look after the elderly and aged at their expense? Madida?
No. You know what? Maybe that could be the problem, but it is just across, even like at a government level, how they define family, like for family responsibility leave, they exclude elder people. But I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's really considerate. It just demonstrates that just across there is no appreciation of older people, or just to demonstrate that we want to take care of the older people. That is just not there.
Yeah. Okay. Got that. Thanks for that call, Madina. And I think you've raised something that I'm expecting someone to comment on. So, if you're an employer, would you, do you give? Let's take. Obviously, now there's a lady working for you. What's the maternity leave plan? Then there's a male, so the husband maybe, does he also get time off when his wife or partner gives birth? And then what's your policy and plan regarding them taking time off to look after the elderly? And can you actually afford that? So there's so many different issues around that. I'm sure David van Wyk thought about that. He's part of our fireside chat. In fact, he's put up the topic to say, let's talk about the elderly and what are we doing with the elderly. David, you've heard some of those thoughts. Anything you want to add to that?
Well, yes, I think that Benchmarks Foundation is very good. They allowed me to move to Bloemfontein, even though they located in Johannesburg, and to work remotely and long distance, which is something that we can do these days because most of our work is not in factories or farms or mines or whatever. It's in offices, and you don't actually have to work in an office with modern technology. You can actually work outside of an office, and you can have more time to take care of those around you. I also think that the issue of the elderly going to Parliament, well, I'm past 66 years old now, so I qualify for Parliament now. That's a very good retirement plan to go to Parliament. I think I should offer my services to some political party and say, guys, elect me so that I can go and retire in Parliament.
Well, that may come soon, yeah, anyway. And then let's see who looks after you when you're beyond 80 and 90 and you're still in Parliament. Who knows, right? Yeah. I wonder who's the oldest person
exactly.
in Parliament, yeah. What's your thoughts about old age homes?
Well, my mother insisted that she buys herself a house, and she bought herself a house. My father was a mining engineer. He looked very well after her. And so she had lots of savings and things like that. And she actually bought herself a house. But she left the family house aside because she didn't feel safe in the suburb, in the family house on her own. She feels safer in the old age home where she is. And also she has this insistence, and it's a very Protestant thing. I don't want to be a burden. I want to take care of myself. But increasingly, her ability to take care of herself is becoming less and less. And so, I have to intervene, taking her to the shops and so on. She's very dangerous when she gets into a car. she can't hear very well and so on. And we went to lunch one day, and she stopped at a robot and she diced a BMW next to her, which left my sister and myself absolutely shocked.
I am trying to imagine that scenario of your mother dicing the BM and hopefully beating the BM, right?
Well, no, she beat him hands down, and then my sister said, "Ma, you can't do that. That's unacceptable." And then from then we took the car keys away.
Well, there you are. Okay, that's a. I mean, you must have some fascinating stories to share, like really beautiful, mother-children stories that you could share over the years, particularly now in our old age.
Well, yes, I think that we do have very interesting stories. The fact is that we lived in the middle of the liberation struggle in Mozambique, and my mother would come and visit us at school to participate in sport events or parents' nights and things like that. And she would drive 600 kilometers through a guerrilla war with minefields and everything else, all on her own. She's very frail and very insecure now, but she was a very powerful, strong woman. She would make her mind up and do something. She would drive alone across that space and make sure that the children know that she's there, that she's participating in their lives and so on. I can't remember how many times she waited for us at the station, coming back from university and so on, to take us back home and so on, pick us up at the station and that sort of thing. Parents do all kinds of things, and they don't ask any questions when they do those things for you. And I think that we shouldn't question when they ask us to do things for them when they are old.
When you talk to your mother now, I mean, how much of that comes up to say, what I did for you this as a mother because I'm your mother, like no questions asked.
No. She never brings that up. I'm the one who brings it up all the time. When she says, "I don't want to be a burden. I'm so sorry that I called you for this." I say to her, "But Ma, why are you worried about that? Why are you concerned? You did so many things for me. Why should you be worried that you are a burden to me?" She doesn't say I owe her at all. In fact, she doesn't believe that I owe her anything at all. But I feel that I owe her something.
I mean, does she ever want to be left on her own, like completely? Has it ever come up?
Well, it's interesting. She chases people away who come and visit her, except for me and my sister. She doesn't like other older people coming there because in the old age village, they come there and they speak about their lives, and their lives was often as lecturers and professors and teachers. She was just a housewife because, like I say, my father took very good care of her. Mm-hmm. He made a sufficient income for her to not work, and that is a huge privilege. But she feels somehow that is a problem when she discusses with other old people and they talk about all these things. But she traveled all over the world with him and so on. So she's had a rich life. She doesn't have to feel inferior because of that.
And also, when older people talk to older people, besides about their careers, I mean, sometimes can you talk yourself down? Where they start talking about so many problems that they all have, because inevitably they would have had problems, right? And that suddenly gets you feeling just less about yourself and just having that all important zest for life and living.
Yeah, I think that what you're saying is true, and I think that she's also paying maybe a price for a very healthy lifestyle because she participated in sports. She was a tennis champion in her community all the time. She participated in all kinds of sport and went walking and running and all kinds of things like that. And so she's very healthy physically, although she's mentally deteriorating now at the moment. She would probably outlive the Queen of England. She would probably live to be 106 or something like that. But the problem is it's going to be a very difficult period. You go to the gym all the time thinking you're extending your life. Sometimes extending your life is perhaps not all that good an idea.
I think you're right about that. We'll get further calls. Luke from Limpopo, I really want to hear what you have to say after this.
USM Alger and RSP Pekane will demonstrate what a North African derby looks like. Who are the real heroes of the North between the Algerians and the Moroccans? This is the first leg of the Total Energies CAF Confederation Cup semi-final. USM Alger versus RSP Pekane. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. This Sunday, 21 April at 9 p.m. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. # We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
Ashraf Garda on SAFM.
All right, so let's get to some of the callers as we continue chatting. Fireside chat with David van Wyk about caring enough for the elderly and what do you do. And I'm particularly interested also about the cultural differences. If you are aware, there are people in South Africa. Well, let's look at the categories. There's white South Africans, colored South Africans, Asian or Indian South Africans, African South Africans. And then you also have people from outside who now live in this country. And then there's also different religions and different cultures that emanate from that. And if you wish to share just how you and your culture deals with old age, then I want to know about that, right? Luke from Limpopo, hi, and thanks for joining us here on the National Pulse.
Hello, Ashraf. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Go ahead, yeah.
Okay, yeah, you know what? For me, it's like it doesn't show any respect. I mean, supposed to take my mother or my father to stay under another roof just because it's getting old. Yeah, because these people, they need our support. They need us just because we must not, forget where we came from. We are here today because of these people. So they need us until the last day of their life. You know what I mean?
Well, they certainly need you, but the question is, whether it's yourself or other people, can you share whether they meet that need? That means they are supportive of their parents or grandparents?
Yeah, but in our culture, especially, specifically as African people, you know what I mean? Yeah, in our culture, these people, they need us for the whole of their life. If you take them, from your home, to another home, just for the reason of saying, because is too old, it doesn't show respect.
Well, I agree it doesn't show respect, but do you think that, communities are doing enough for the older people, or they still, never mind what you said about your culture, they're largely still left and they're struggling and not enough is being done for them?
But they have to, because that is where we came from. They have to make sure those people, they get everything what they need, because you are also going to be on that age. So we must just keep on that unity. We need that spirit of unity from the way it started, from the bottom up to the top. We can't regret someone just because it's getting old. No, it's your mother, it's your father. Just take care of them.
Wow.
Yeah. Just take care of them. Don't complicate it. Just take care of them as they did when you are young. Because they look after you. From your birthday until now. And then you must look after them.
Okay, got that. Thanks for your contribution, Luke, and I think an invaluable one at that. We still continue chatting with David van Wyk. I think there's maybe a voice note that we can play before we get to David, and we'll wrap up at just before 6. So let's hear the voice note.
Good afternoon to you, Ashraf, and to David. Just listening to David, man, my suggestion is, now she's 80, 90, man. Why not live with her, bring her home somewhere, find a place to live. And together, like you right there at your beck and call. Please do that. Thank you, Scully.
Scully says, live with your mother. I think David said something along that line, and he will clear that up again. David, response?
Well, yes. I think that it's important to note that I'm living in my father's house at the moment, which was standing empty because my brother passed away and my mother left here. She didn't feel safe here. She went to the old age home, and she would refuse to come here. She would refuse to come and live here because she doesn't want to be a burden. That is what she says. But I decided that I will come all the way from Joburg. I could have stayed in Joburg and continued with my work and just ignored her. And this house would have been vandalized and missed. The other thing is, in my work, I come across many people in communities where, because of unemployment, the youth or the younger people are unemployed in the household, and everyone is living off the old person's pension. And I think that's also a bit of a problem. We really need to overcome the challenges that face our society so that we don't put this additional burden on them. I go to the shops with my mother often, and I see other old people, and they go through the shop with their trolley, but the trolley remains empty because they can't afford what is there.
Well, I was saying that to the team off air to say, what? There's a lot of older people who are struggling. They are completely alone, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's very sad to see someone look at a need, but they can't afford to to meet that need, the price on the need is too high for them.
What do you say when you go shopping with your mum? And obviously she's slower, naturally so, and maybe for the moment people who see her they sort of tend to dismiss her because inevitably they sort of irritate younger people and they just come in the way and they're too slow and they can't hear and they don't get it and they just come into our spaces, so to speak. When they sort of articulate that. In whichever way, in body language or words, what do you say? What do you think about that?
Well, they struggle in the shops. My mother struggles in the shop, but to put in the card in the machine, to type in the password, to remember the password, and so on. All of that is very, very problematic for her, And so, it is good that I'm here to be able to go to the shop with her. But she's also interesting. She makes for interesting conversation. Because she's lonely, she will stop in the middle of the shop next to a baby and admire the baby. Or she would tell the teller, "Your hair is so beautiful today," just to get the conversation going.
Understandable. I'll tell you what you do. Yeah. Let's do this. We're going to take one quick call from Paul. Paul, 30 seconds to make your point. Then we'll wrap up then with David. Right, Paul? Go ahead. Hello.
Hello. How are you?
I'm very good. Go ahead.
Good. No, I agree with the previous caller. We cannot take our parents to the home office, the homes. I once witnessed one home. I won't say which is it, but it's within South Africa where I went. I saw old people being beaten, not well taken care of. Because remember, those people at homes, one, they're not the parents, so they're not the kids to those guys. So they won't take care with the love that we as their children take care of them. So with me, I stay with two parents. They're all odd. I'm staying with them and I'm taking care of them.
Okay, great that you're doing that, Paul. Thanks for that. Right, let's. We got about 30 seconds to wrap up. You may want to respond to that, David, and perhaps as you answer, what do you tell a person who's an absent child, absent daughter, or absent granddaughter to a parent or grandparent? And you've got 30 seconds.
They should look at the eyes of those parents. Those people look so absolutely miserable. That feeling of being abandoned. It must be so terrible. And we are all going to go there. We're all walking the same path, and so we better take care now because we will want to be taken care of then.
Well, there you are. I think that's a point well made. Let's leave it at that. It's been really great chatting to you and having you as part of this fireside chat. And you've certainly got us thinking all for the better part of an hour. So thank you so much for your time, David.
Thank you very much for having us. Right. And thank you for a very good program.
There we are. Thank you. David van Wyk, lead researcher at the Benchmarks Foundation. But in this case, talking about, do we care enough for the elderly? Let's end the show with the parting shot. Today we sign up for the words of Leila Akita, who once said, "Love, care and treasure the elderly people in the society." Well, that's it for the show. Lots of people to thank. We've got Phineas. In fact, Lebo's not here today, so we've got Stenza with us today, Busani, and we've got Temba Dlamini as per always, right? And a reminder that coming up next, it's Oliver Dixon. Goodbye, good night. I will check you out on Monday, but right now it's the news at 6 with Greg House.
Thank you again, Ashraf. More arrests of Rand Water murders in Knysna municipality facing administration. Good evening. 3 suspects have been arrested by police in connection with the murders of Rand Water executive Tepo Hojoala and his bodyguard. They were shot and killed in front of learners at a community hall in Zakaria Park, south of Johannesburg, during a back-to-school event in January. Another suspect was arrested in March for alleged possession of a firearm found in his possession and suspected to be the one used during the